Hey there, tonight we're diving into the bustling world of Roman artisans hustling through the forum's chaos. What you're about to discover is how they transformed everyday survival into an art form, quite literally, with a touch of humor that even the emperors couldn't resist. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. So there you are, elbow to elbow with about 150,000 other sweaty souls in the Roman Forum. Here's your morning routine. Dodge a donkey, sidestep a toga-clad senator, and try not to trip over a stray amphora. Welcome to the ancient world's equivalent of a bustling metropolis, where the air is thick with the scent of olive oil, and the cacophony of bartering voices competes with the occasional shout of a street performer trying to earn his daily bread by juggling flaming torches. It's organized chaos, but for the Roman artisan it's home. And trust me, the competition here makes Black Friday look like a lazy Sunday brunch. The Forum wasn't just a place. It was the heartbeat of Rome. You had your temples, your basilicas, and your shops all crammed into a space that would make a New York City grid seem spacious. As an artisan, you had to claim your slice of this imperial pie. Setting up shop was an art form in itself. You'd rise at the crack of dawn, or maybe even before that if you had a particularly prime spot to secure. And you needed to, because the early bird got the sesterces, or at least the chance to cut through the noise of 1,000 other vendors hawking their wares. The logistics were as daunting as a Caesar's ego. Imagine dragging all your tools and goods through the narrow streets of Rome, where every corner might greet you with a chariot race or a philosophical debate that could derail your morning plans. The Forum was no place for the faint-hearted. You needed a strategy, a plan to outsmart the guy selling the same pottery or sandals 2 stalls down. Maybe you'd offer a deal, like 2 candlesticks for the price of 1, or throw in a free cup with every purchase. Pricing strategies were your secret weapon. A denarius here, a sestrius there, and suddenly you're the talk of the taberna. In the Roman Forum, artisans weren't just sellers. They were lifelines of daily life. From the blacksmith pounding away at his anvil, creating the tools and weapons that kept Roman society ticking, to the potter shaping clay into vessels that would store everything from wine to olive oil. Every artisan contributed to the grand machine that was Rome. Without them, the city might have ground to a halt, or at least suffered a severe shortage of mosaic tiles. But let's not romanticize it too much. Working in the Forum was no idyllic scene from a marble frieze. The reality, it was noisy, dirty, and could be downright dangerous. Thieves lurked in every shadow, ready to nab a purse or a prized piece of craftsmanship. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of a market inspector who might decide it was time for you to pay an unexpected fee to keep your stall operational. Yes, corruption was alive and well, even back then. The artisans were masters of adaptation, constantly changing their tactics to stay ahead. Maybe today it was all about textiles, but tomorrow, who knows? The demand could shift like the tides of the Tiber. Being an artisan meant having a finger on the pulse of Roman tastes, which could pivot faster than you can say, carpe diem. And in a city where fashion and status were everything, keeping up with the latest trends was essential. Miss a beat, and you might find yourself as out of date as a plebeian tunic in a patrician's closet. Artisans also played a crucial role in the social fabric of Rome. They were the conduits through which news and gossip flowed. What's the latest scandal from the Senate? Who's the newest gladiator sensation? The Forum was not just a marketplace. It was the ancient equivalent of social media, with artisans as the influencers of their day. They knew who was who and what was what, and they weren't afraid to share it with their patrons, maybe over a discounted goblet if you were lucky. Yet, despite the glamour of it all, the life of an artisan was no easy path. It was a constant hustle, a daily grind that required grit and tenacity. The Forum was a jungle, and only the most cunning survived. But for those who did, the rewards could be substantial. A successful day in the Forum could mean the difference between a humble dinner of bread and water or a feast fit for a minor deity, complete with garum sauce. In a world where the stakes were as high as the columns that lined the Forum, artisans were the unsung heroes, the backbone of an empire that stretched from Britannia to Egypt. They might not have worn laurel crowns or commanded legions, but without their skill and ingenuity, Rome might have been just another footnote in the annals of history. And so, as you navigate the bustling chaos of the Forum, remember this. The artisans of Rome weren't just surviving. They were thriving in the heart of an empire that never slept. So as the dust settles on the Forum, and you mentally prepare for yet another day in the Roman hustle, let's dive into the economic roller coaster that artisans faced, a ride wilder than a chariot race on the Circus Maximus track. It all starts with grain prices, a real Achilles heel of ancient Rome's economic machine. Picture this. One day you're buying wheat at a decent rate. The next it skyrocketed because some governor in Egypt decided to play politics with grain shipments. Talk about a recipe for financial heartburn. You see, grain wasn't just food. It was the bedrock of Roman commerce, influencing everything from bread prices to the mood of the masses. When grain prices spiked, everyone felt it, from the patrician with his lavish feasts to the artisan scraping by on a handful of denarii. Here's the kicker. The government had a grain dole to keep the populace from revolting. But if you were an artisan, you were often too well off to qualify, yet too poor to comfortably navigate the price swings. A real Goldilocks zone of economic misery. Now, let's talk patrons. The high-rolling, toga-wearing big shots who could make or break an artisan's career faster than you can say, veni, vidi, vici. These patrons were the venture capitalists of the ancient world, investing in talent and expecting a solid return on their sesterces. But they were as fickle as the Tiber in flood season. One moment they're commissioning a grand mosaic for their latest villa, and the next they've moved on to someone who promises to make even shinier tiles. Keeping a patron happy was like balancing a lyre on a tightrope. A single misstep could send your fortunes tumbling. Speaking of fortunes, let's not forget the cost of materials. Bronze, marble, pigments, all the good stuff artisans needed came with price tags that could induce a Roman fainting spell. Marble, for instance, could cost as much as 50 denarii per cubic foot, depending on quality. That's about the same price as a modest slave. And don't even get started on the price fluctuations of exotic pigments like Tyrian purple. Talk about a hue with a price as royal as its color. But wait, there's a silver lining, or rather, a collegium-shaped one, into the trade guilds, or collegia, the ancient equivalent of a workers' union, providing a semblance of stability in a world where stability was as rare as a Roman who didn't enjoy a good feast. These collegia offered collective bargaining power and a sense of community. They could negotiate better prices for materials, share tools, and even pool resources for that big contract from a senator who wanted a new fountain or fresco. It was a bit like having a safety net, but one that occasionally had holes big enough to let through the odd financial catastrophe. And then there were the artisans' survival tactics. Oh, the creativity. Some artisans would band together, forming small cooperatives to share the burden of materials and labor costs. Others would diversify their skills, becoming jacks of all trades just to keep the sestertii rolling in. Imagine a blacksmith who also dabbles in pottery, or a weaver who moonlights as a leather worker. In a market as unpredictable as the Roman Forum, adaptability wasn't just an asset, it was a necessity. Let's not forget the bartering. When coin was scarce, sometimes a pair of sandals could be traded for a new set of tools, or a ceramic jug for a bushel of grain. This was the original sharing economy, long before apps and the internet turned it into a billion-dollar industry. It was a system born out of necessity, a way to keep the wheels turning when cash flow was tighter than a senator's toga at a banquet. But all the clever strategies in the world couldn't completely insulate artisans from the whims of the economy or the caprices of their patrons. The truth was, surviving in the Forum required a mix of skill, luck, and more than a little bravado. Yet despite the odds, many artisans not only survived, they thrived. They were the craftsmen and women who left their mark on history, their work etched in stone and memory. As you ponder this ancient dance of commerce and creativity, remember that these artisans were more than just cogs in the Roman machine. They were the architects of their own destinies, navigating a world where fortune could turn on a sestertius. They may have battled economic storms and capricious patrons, but their legacy is one of resilience and ingenuity, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dared to dream in the shadow of Rome's mighty forum. And with that, our journey through the bustling heart of ancient commerce continues, as we delve deeper into the lives and strategies of these remarkable craftsmen in the upcoming parts. So, as our journey through the bustling heart of ancient commerce continues, let's dive into the social jungle that was the Roman artisan community. This wasn't just about who could carve the fanciest column or weave the softest toga. It was a vibrant, stratified world where your trade determined your place in the pecking order. First, let's talk about the hierarchy within the artisan ranks. You might think of these craftspeople as a cohesive group, all elbowing for space in the forum, but reality paints a different picture. Some trades had the allure of a midnight chariot race, while others were as glamorous as a mud wrestling contest. Take, for instance, the sculptors and massaists. These folks were the rock stars of the artisan world, the Michelangelos before Michelangelo was a twinkle in the Renaissance's eye. Their work adorned the homes of the wealthy and the walls of the grandest temples, earning them a prestige that a humble cobbler could only dream of. Then you had the blacksmiths, the backbone of practicality, hammering out everything from tools to the swords that would win empires. They were respected, sure, but more in the way you respect a reliable pair of sandals rather than a pair of gilded gladiator boots. Their work was essential, which meant they were indispensable, like Wi-Fi at a tech conference. Now, contrast that with the leatherworkers or tailors. These artisans were as low on the social ladder as a Roman snail's belly. Sure, everyone needed a good pair of shoes or a tunic that wouldn't fall apart in the rain, but these weren't trades that got you noticed by the high rollers of Roman society. In the great feast of Roman life, they were the breadsticks, necessary but far from exciting. And what about the potters? Ah, the potters. With their hands constantly in clay, they were like the potluck guests who brought the most reliable dish, not flashy, but everyone needed their wares. They churned out amphorae by the dozen, each one ready to be filled with olive oil or wine, the ancient world's ambrosia. But in terms of prestige, let's just say they weren't exactly getting front-row seats at the gladiator games. Speaking of which, let's take a cue from Pliny the Elder, our ancient gossip columnist with a penchant for natural history. Pliny's writings give us a glimpse into how the Romans themselves viewed these artisans. He often waxed lyrical about the wonders of Roman ingenuity, but don't be fooled. Pliny had a tendency to romanticize, painting a picture of artisans as noble creators shaping the empire with their bare hands. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find artisans were more like the unsung heroes of a sitcom, constantly hustling, often overlooked, and crucial to the plot. Pliny, in his Natural History, might have praised the artistry of a well-crafted statue or the precision of a beautifully laid mosaic, but he conveniently glossed over the less glamorous aspects, like the fact that many artisans worked in cramped workshops, inhaling dust and fumes day in and day out, or that a simple miscalculation could turn a week's worth of work into a pile of rubble. The reality was less about the beauty of creation and more about the stress of meeting deadlines and keeping patrons happy. And speaking of patrons, let's not forget how they fit into this social puzzle. These patrons were the puppet masters pulling the strings, and an artisan's relationship with them was as delicate as a politician's promise. A good patron could elevate an artisan's status faster than you can say Senerus Populusque Romanus, but a fickle one could leave them scrambling for scraps in the forum's shadow. Beyond the patrons, artisans had to navigate the ever-shifting tides of public opinion. Romans were nothing if not fashion-conscious, and trends could change as quickly as a Roman road was paved. One day, everyone wanted marble busts of their ancestors. The next, it was all about intricate frescoes depicting epic mythological scenes. Keeping up with these trends was like riding a roller coaster without a safety bar, exhilarating but potentially disastrous. And let's not forget the collegia, those artisan guilds that were part support group, part social club. They provided a semblance of order, helping artisans band together, negotiate better terms, and when necessary, stand united against the whims of a capricious market. But they were also a hotbed of intrigue, where alliances were forged and rivalries simmered. Getting on the wrong side of a guild leader could be as perilous as crossing a Roman senator on a bad day. In this world, reputation was everything, and it could be as fragile as a piece of blown glass. A single mistake, a poorly made product, or a delayed delivery could spell disaster. Artisans relied on word of mouth, the ancient version of Yelp reviews, to secure future work. A bad review from a disgruntled patrician could spread through the forum faster than a charioteer on race day. Yet, despite the challenges, the Roman artisan community was a microcosm of resilience. They were the dreamers who dared to carve a name for themselves in the stone of history. They were the innovators who juggled the demands of art, commerce, and survival with the deftness of a street performer. And while the marble friezes and grand mosaics might have captured the glory of Rome, it was the hands of these artisans that brought them to life. So, as we continue to unravel the layers of this ancient world, let's keep our eyes on the artisans. They might not have wielded power like the senators or commanded armies like the generals, but their legacy is etched in every corner of Rome. With each step through the forum, remember that beneath the grandeur and the glory, it was the artisans, those unsung craftsmen and craftswomen, who truly shaped the empire. Stay tuned, because we've only just begun to explore the labyrinthine world of these remarkable creators. As we wade deeper into the Roman artisans' world, let's switch gears to the political chessboard, where these craftsmen were often the pawns. You see, Roman politicians had a knack for using artisans like a Swiss army knife, versatile and handy in a pinch. From the grand aqueducts that quenched Rome's thirst to those towering triumphal arches that screamed, "Look how awesome we are." Artisans were the unsung heroes, turning political promises into tangible reality. Consider the aqueducts, those marvels of engineering that transported water across the empire like a liquid conveyor belt. Behind every arch and channel were skilled stonemasons and laborers, their fingers calloused from shaping the very blocks that held the empire's thirst at bay. But here's the rub. These projects were as much about politics as they were about public service. A savvy politician could win the hearts and votes of the plebeian masses by commissioning a new aqueduct. It was like offering free Wi-Fi in a modern city, an instant popularity boost. And then there were the forums and basilicas, those grand public buildings that served as the backdrop for political posturing and power plays. The artisans constructing these structures were unwitting accomplices in a game of one-upmanship among Rome's elite. The bigger and more opulent the building, the greater the political clout. Julius Caesar, ever the showman, was a master of this tactic. He famously funded the Forum Julium out of his own pocket. Well, technically out of Rome's coffers. But let's not split hairs. This move wasn't just about providing a public space. It was Caesar's way of cementing his legacy, quite literally in stone. Speaking of Julius Caesar, let's talk about how his reforms stirred the pot in the artisan community. His reign was a whirlwind of change, and for artisans, it brought both opportunities and headaches. On one hand, Caesar's ambitious building projects meant work aplenty. On the other, his centralization of power shifted the economic landscape dramatically. Artisans who once relied on the patronage of local elites now found themselves at the mercy of imperial favor. It was like suddenly having to impress the CEO instead of your department manager. Caesar's reforms also included measures to curb corruption, particularly among the market inspectors who had a reputation for being as slippery as a Roman eel. In theory, this was great news for artisans, who were often victims of these inspectors' fees. In practice, however, it meant navigating a bureaucracy that was as labyrinthine as the Minotaur's maze. And let's not forget the impact of Rome's ever-changing political alliances and conflicts. Wars required weapons, armor, and supplies, creating a boom for blacksmiths and leatherworkers. However, peace, or the Roman version of it, which was more like a temporary pause, could lead to a sudden drop in demand. The economy swayed like a drunken reveler at a bacchanalia, and artisans needed to be as nimble as a charioteer to avoid being trampled in the chaos. Amidst all this, the artisans had to navigate the fickle waters of Roman politics with the precision of an acrobat. Take the example of the Collegium Fabrum, a guild of builders and construction workers. They often found themselves caught between their loyalty to the state and their need to secure private commissions. When political winds shifted, these artisans had to be ready to pivot or risk sinking faster than a lead amphora in the Tiber. The political climate also influenced the types of projects that were in demand. During times of political unrest, there was a surge in commissions for statues and monuments glorifying Rome and its leaders. It was the ancient equivalent of a PR campaign, with marble and bronze as the mediums. Artisans had to be adept not only at their craft, but also at reading the political tea leaves, anticipating which projects would be the next big thing. Yet, as much as they were pawns in the political game, artisans were also players in their own right. They were the ones who gave form to the political ambitions of Rome's leaders, their work shaping the very skyline of the city. Each building, statue, and fresco was a testament to their skill and resilience, a reminder that even in the shadow of political titans, it was the craftsmen who left a tangible mark on history. So, while politicians plotted and schemed, it was the artisans who built the foundations of those dreams. They turned visions into reality, crafting the world of Caesar and Cicero, leaving behind a legacy as enduring as the stones they shaped. Their lives were a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability, proving that even in a world dominated by political power, the artisan spirit was indomitable. And as we prepare to dive into the next chapter of this historical saga, let's keep our eyes on these craftsmen who, amidst the chaos, carved out a piece of eternity. As we prepare to dive into the next chapter of this historical saga, let's keep our eyes on these craftsmen who, amidst the chaos, carved out a piece of eternity. Now, let's take a step back and ponder how these Roman artisans, despite their daily grind in the Forum's frenzy, left an indelible mark on the world that echoes through the corridors of history even today. First off, let's obliterate the myth that Roman artisans lived glamorous lives akin to the stars of a Roman amphitheater. The reality, their existence was less a series of triumphs and more a game of survival, where the stakes were higher than the Colosseum on a sunny day. Sure, they crafted exquisite mosaics and statues that would make even the most hardened senator shed a tear, but their daily life was a far cry from luxurious. Picture this, a cramped workshop, more dust than daylight, and the constant clamor of haggling voices. Glamorous, more like a labor-intensive episode of Roman Survivor. The allure of the artisan's life was more a story of grit than glory. They had to be part economist, part artist, and part diplomat, juggling the fluctuating economy with the finesse of a seasoned juggler handling flaming torches. Remember, these artisans didn't just make things, they made things happen. They were the original multitaskers, adapting to demand with the agility of a cat on a hot tin roof. If Roman fashion suddenly dictated a craze for Corinthian columns instead of Doric, you can bet these artisans were already chiseling away at their limestone blocks, ready to meet the trend before it became yesterday's news. Their contributions to modern craftsmanship are as deep as a Roman aqueduct and twice as enduring. The techniques they perfected, like the use of concrete, the invention of the Roman arch, and the development of intricate frescoes, laid the groundwork for architectural marvels that still inspire awe today. Without these innovations, modern architecture might have missed out on some of its most sophisticated tricks. The Pantheon, with its majestic dome, is a testament to a civilization that knew how to push the boundaries of engineering with nothing but a plumb line and sheer determination. But let's not forget their resilience, a theme as central to Roman artisans as the Forum itself. They knew how to pivot faster than a politician at a Senate hearing. When grain prices spiked or a patron decided to take their business elsewhere, these artisans didn't just roll over and accept their fate. No, they hustled, they haggled, and they diversified. It wasn't unusual for a blacksmith to dabble in pottery or a sculptor to try his hand at painting. Talk about career agility. Their ability to adapt was an art form in itself, a lesson that modern entrepreneurs could take a page from. Now, considering their legacy, it's crucial to debunk another myth, that these artisans were simply tools of the Roman elite, bending to every whim of their patrician patrons. While it's true that they often worked under the patronage of Rome's wealthiest, they were far from mere puppets. These craftsmen held the power of choice in their hands, literally. A well-crafted piece could elevate an artisan's status, earning them a reputation that even the most opulent patron couldn't ignore. In a world dominated by power and politics, these artisans wielded their own unique influence, shaping not just stone and metal, but the very culture of Rome. Speaking of culture, remember that artisans were also cultural curators. Their work's a reflection of Rome's ever-shifting societal norms and values. They were the ones who immortalized Rome's greatest victories and darkest defeats, capturing the essence of an empire in every chisel stroke and brush sweep. Their mosaics and frescoes served not just as decoration, but as a historical record, a visual narrative of Rome's grandeur and grit. So, what lessons do these ancient artisans impart to us today? For one, they remind us of the power of adaptability. In a world where demand could shift with the wind, they taught us that survival often depends on our ability to reinvent, to catch the wave before it crashes. They also show us the importance of resilience. Despite the forum's chaos, economic upheavals, and political machinations, these artisans stood their ground, their legacy as enduring as the very stones they carved. Finally, they offer a timeless reminder that true craftsmanship requires more than skill. It demands passion, persistence, and a pinch of audacity. Whether it was a humble potter shaping clay or a master sculptor chiseling marble, these artisans poured their soul into their work, leaving behind a legacy that transcends time and space. So, next time you pass by a grand building or admire a piece of intricate art, tip your hat to the unsung heroes of history, the Roman artisans who, with their tenacity and talent, crafted not just the world of their time, but also laid the foundations for the beauty and innovation we enjoy today. In the grand tapestry of history, their thread is woven inextricably, a testament to the enduring spirit of human creativity. And as you close this chapter on the bustling, chaotic, and ever-resilient world of Roman artisans, remember, in the heart of every masterpiece lies the untold story of those who dared to dream beyond the limits of their world. In an age when indoor plumbing was a luxury and Wi-Fi was a fever dream, Darius the Great decided that if he was going to rule the Achaemenid Empire, he might as well do it in style. Enter Persepolis, the ceremonial capital that put the extra in extravagance. Picture a sprawling complex of palaces, treasury buildings, and grand halls, popping up in 518 BCE like the ancient world's answer to Las Vegas, minus the slot machines, but with a lot more stone reliefs. Darius wasn't just building a city, he was crafting a spectacle, a statement piece. This wasn't merely a hub for administrative paperwork or storing all that sweet tribute from across the empire. No, Persepolis was a symbol, a shiny, stone-clad look what I can do, to friends and foes alike. Think of it as the ultimate power move in the ancient world, a palace complex that screamed, "I have arrived, and I brought a construction crew." Now, if you're imagining Darius standing atop a hill, pointing dramatically at the horizon, while a team of architects scribbles furiously on papyrus, you're not far off. His vision for Persepolis was grander than a Persian rug sale. He wanted a place that could host festivals, showcase the empire's wealth, and intimidate visiting dignitaries, or at least make them envious enough to rethink their life choices. The location he chose, nestled in the Khuzestan province, wasn't exactly a bustling metropolis, making it the ancient equivalent of building Versailles in the middle of a desert. This spot was no accident, though. It was strategically positioned near the heart of the Persian Empire, a logistical choice as much as a symbolic one. It wasn't just about showing off. It was about centralizing power, a place where the empire's vastness could be managed, and where the ceremonial could meet the bureaucratic. But let's not kid ourselves. This was also a bit of a PR stunt. Darius wanted the world to know that he wasn't just any king. He was the asterisk king with a capital K. And let's talk logistics, because building Persepolis wasn't just a matter of snapping one's fingers and watching the magic happen. It required a labor force that could make the pyramids look like a weekend DIY project. Thousands of workers from every corner of the empire were conscripted into service. They toiled away under a sun that must have felt like it was personally offended by their presence. Craftsmen, laborers, artists, they all played a part in this epic game of empire building. You could say that Persepolis was the original multinational corporation, except instead of stock options, there were stone blocks and chisels. The scale of this project was immense. The Apadana, the grand audience hall, was alone big enough to host a small country's worth of guests, which was handy since Darius liked to throw the kind of parties that could make a modern royal wedding look like a backyard BBQ. The hall itself was supported by 72 columns, each standing a towering 20 meters high. And if you're wondering just how much that cost, well, let's just say it wasn't pocket change. The empire's coffers were tapped, and tribute from subject lands helped foot the bill. And then there's the artwork. Ah, the reliefs. These weren't just decorative touches. They were political statements carved into stone. The walls of Persepolis told stories of unity, power, and prosperity, featuring delegations from across the empire bringing gifts to the king. A bit like a parade, but with fewer floats and more gold. These images served a dual purpose, to awe the visitors and remind them of their place in the pecking order. It was ancient propaganda at its finest. But of course, no grand project would be complete without a bit of myth-making. The romantic allure of Persepolis is undeniable. It's easy to get swept up in the tales of opulence and power, but the reality was far more complex. Behind the grandeur was a machine that required constant maintenance, from the workforce that kept the city running to the political maneuvering needed to keep the empire's many parts in harmony. Darius might have been the face of this grand endeavor, but it was the collective effort of thousands that brought his vision to life. Persepolis stands as a testament not just to a king's ambition, but to the empire that made it possible. It was a place where politics, art, and architecture intersected, creating a legacy that has endured for millennia. Yet, for all its splendor, Persepolis was also a reminder of the ephemerality of power. It symbolized the heights of Achaemenid grandeur, but also foreshadowed the impermanence of even the mightiest empires. So, as you drift off to sleep, think about the monumental task that was Persepolis, the grand vision of Darius the Great, and the countless hands that built an empire's dream in the heart of ancient Persia. Because even in history, sometimes the story is as much about the journey as it is about the destination, but enough about Darius's grand vision and the empire's logistical prowess. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty, the architectural genius that turned a patch of Persian dirt into the jewel that is Persepolis. Here's where the real magic happened, though it was less about abracadabra and more about back-breaking labor and artistic wizardry. Imagine those colossal columns soaring into the sky, each one a testament to the empire's sheer determination to defy gravity and common sense. The Apadana alone boasted 72 of these bad boys, each standing a cool 20 meters high. That's taller than a 5-story building, folks, and let's not even start on the decorative flourishes. Each column topped with double-headed bulls or lions, the ancient world's answer to architectural bling. If you ever doubted that ancient Persians knew how to make an entrance, this should settle it. But while the columns might grab your attention first, it's the intricate stone reliefs that hold it. These are not just pretty pictures, but a masterclass in propaganda. Each carving is a story, a snapshot of an empire in its prime. From the procession of dignitaries bearing gifts, gold, textiles, exotic animals, you get a sense of the empire's vast reach. It's like a who's who of the ancient world, all lined up to pay homage to the Persian king. And yes, in case you're wondering, this was a way to flex on the neighbors. Imagine Instagram, but with chisel and stone. The artistic talent behind these works came from across the empire, a multicultural ensemble cast if there ever was one. Craftsmen hailed from Egypt, Greece, Babylon, and even India, each bringing their own flair to the mix. It's a bit like the United Nations of ancient artisans coming together to create something truly epic. This mix of styles and techniques resulted in a unique blend of Persian and foreign influences, making Persepolis not only a capital, but a cultural melting pot. A globalized workforce in 500 BCE, you bet. But don't be fooled by the glamour of it all. Building Persepolis wasn't just a leisurely stroll through the arts and crafts aisle. It was a massive undertaking, requiring a level of coordination that would make a modern-day project manager sweat. Thousands of laborers worked around the clock, likely fueled by little more than bread, onions, and the looming threat of displeasing the king. The site was a beehive of activity, stone being quarried and transported, timber harvested and shaped, bricks baked under the sun. It was a construction circus that left no room for slackers. Now, let's address those legendary Persian parties you've probably heard about. You know, the ones where everyone was supposedly lounging on silk cushions, sipping wine from golden goblets as harpists played in the background. Well, let's just say that not everyone was on the VIP list. Sure, Darius and his entourage might have enjoyed a feast or two, but for the average worker, life was less Great Gatsby and more sweat and toil. The reality was a harsh grind under the relentless sun, with little in the way of creature comforts. That said, when the Persians did throw a party, They didn't hold back. The Nowruz festival, the Persian New Year, was one such occasion where Persepolis transformed into a stage for celebration. Delegations from across the empire would gather, bearing gifts and tributes, a reminder of the king's dominion. This wasn't just about feasting. It was a diplomatic ballet, a chance to showcase unity and power in one dazzling display. But even then, the spectacle was as much for the benefit of visiting dignitaries as it was for the home crowd. Economically speaking, Persepolis was a bit like building a gold-plated yacht in the middle of the desert. Impressive, expensive, and not exactly practical. The resources poured into its construction could have funded a small army, yet it was an investment in image and influence. The empire's coffers were substantial, thanks to a well-oiled machine of taxation and tribute. So, while the price tag of Persepolis was hefty, it was a strategic expenditure, a literal and metaphorical foundation for Persian supremacy. But for all its splendor, Persepolis was not invulnerable. The very elements that made it a symbol of power also foreshadowed its downfall. Those grand stone reliefs didn't just celebrate unity, they also highlighted the empire's Achilles heel, its vastness. Managing such a sprawling realm was a Herculean task, one that required constant vigilance and deft political maneuvering. Even the mightiest columns can only hold up an empire for so long before the cracks start to show. So, as the sun sets over the ruins of Persepolis, casting long shadows on the age-old stones, remember this. It was as much a testament to human ambition as it was a reminder of our limitations. Darius's dream was grand, and the reality was both magnificent and flawed. Yet, in the end, Persepolis remains, a silent witness to the grandeur and demise of an empire that dared to dream big. And isn't that the ultimate legacy? A reminder that even the most monumental achievements are but fleeting moments in the sands of time. Now, let's take a peek behind the curtain of this ancient Las Vegas, where the real magic wasn't in the architecture alone, but in the economic wizardry that made Persepolis rise from the desert like a mirage. Picture the Achaemenid Empire as a vast, humming machine, a juggernaut of trade routes and tribute, each cog finely tuned to keep the emperor's grand dream afloat. You see, Darius wasn't just flexing his artistic muscles. He was orchestrating an economic symphony that would make even modern-day financiers nod in respect. Building Persepolis was akin to undertaking the world's most ostentatious Kickstarter campaign, only with fewer backers and more coercion. It wasn't just about hauling stones and sculpting columns. It was about financing a vision that, quite frankly, could have bankrupted a lesser realm. So, who footed the bill for this desert jewel? The answer, as with most things in empire building, was a mix of taxation, tribute, and some very savvy resource management. First, let's talk numbers, because the cost of constructing Persepolis was no pocket change. Estimates suggest it took about 30 years to build, with thousands of workers laboring tirelessly. The empire's coffers were filled by a sprawling network of satrapies, regional governors who collected taxes and tributes like ancient IRS agents, but with more swords and fewer audits. The Achaemenid Empire stretched from Egypt to India, each region contributing its share, whether in gold, silver, or the ever-useful barley. In a way, Darius had a global economy on his hands, minus the stock market crashes and insider trading. But it wasn't just about collecting shiny objects and stockpiling grain. The empire's economy was a well-oiled machine, driven by extensive trade routes that crisscrossed continents like ancient highways. Picture the Royal Road, a 500-kilometer stretch of infrastructure connecting Sardes in the west to Susa in the east. This was no ordinary dirt path. It was the Silk Road's older, less fashion-conscious cousin, facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and most importantly, revenue. The road cut travel time drastically, allowing messengers to cover the distance in 9 days, a feat that would make FedEx envious. Now, let's switch gears and talk about those trade routes, the veins of this ancient economic beast. The Persians were master networkers long before LinkedIn was a thing. Their empire was a melting pot of cultures and resources, each region contributing its own specialty to the imperial potluck. From the lush gardens of Babylon came textiles and spices, while Egypt supplied grain and gold. India chipped in with precious stones and exotic animals, making Persepolis a showcase of the empire's diversity. This was globalization before it was cool, folks. Of course, Sustaining such an economic engine required more than just clever logistics. It demanded a diplomatic finesse that would put modern politicians to shame. Darius knew that maintaining harmony among diverse cultures was key to keeping the coffers full. His empire was a tapestry of languages, religions, and customs, all woven together under the aegis of Persian rule. The king's policy of tolerance, allowing subject peoples to maintain their traditions, was as much a strategic move as it was a gesture of goodwill. Yet, for all its complexity, this economic powerhouse was not without its vulnerabilities. The sheer scale of the empire meant that any disruption, whether a rebellion in Egypt or a trade hiccup on the royal road, could send ripples throughout the realm. Managing such an unwieldy beast required constant vigilance, a balancing act that would make even the most seasoned tightrope walkers break a sweat. Now, let's not sugarcoat things. The workers who toiled in the shadows of Persepolis' grandeur were not exactly living the Persian dream. While the empire thrived on its wealth and power, the reality for the laborers was far less glamorous. These men and women, drawn from conquered lands, were the unsung heroes of Darius's grand vision. They were the ones chiseling the stones, carving the reliefs, and erecting the columns, all under the sweltering sun and the ever-watchful eyes of overseers. In essence, Persepolis was a monument not just to imperial ambition, but to the human cost of such ambition. It's one thing to marvel at the artistry of the city. It's another to recognize the sweat and toil that made it possible. The empire's prosperity was built on the backs of those who had no choice but to serve, a harsh reality that tempers the romantic allure of ancient grandeur. Yet, for all the myth-busting, there's no denying the seductive appeal of Persepolis. The city was a stage where the empire flaunted its might, a place where the grandeur of Persia was writ large in stone and gold. It was a symbol of unity and power, a testament to the empire's ability to marshal resources and people on an unprecedented scale. The very act of building Persepolis was a declaration to the world. Behold what we can achieve, and tremble at our magnificence. As the story of Persepolis unfolds, it's clear that the city's legacy is as multifaceted as the empire itself. It was a place where art and economics danced a delicate tango, where the dreams of kings were etched into history by the hands of nameless laborers. And while the ruins of Persepolis now stand silent, they continue to speak volumes about the ambitions and contradictions of human civilization. In the grand tapestry of history, Persepolis is a thread that shines brightly, a reminder of what can be accomplished when vision meets determination. But it also warns of the impermanence of power, the fragility of even the mightiest empires. So, as we continue our journey through the echoes of ancient Persia, let's keep our eyes open for the lessons it still has to teach, about ambition, unity, and the costs of empire building. Let's zoom in on Persepolis, where more than just stones were set in place. This city was a living, breathing declaration of Persian power, a place where politics and culture mingled like guests at a royal shindig. On one hand, it was the ultimate vanity project, a stone-clad self-portrait of the empire. On the other, it was a mastermind's chessboard, where each piece, be it a structure, a relief, or a festival, played a strategic role in the empire's grand narrative. Politically, Persepolis was the ancient equivalent of a carefully curated Instagram feed. Every detail was designed to present Persia in the best possible light. The reliefs, for instance, were more than just eye candy. They were the empire's press releases, carved in stone. Each image was a message to subjects and rivals alike. Behold our unity and diversity. These were not just depictions of tribute bearers, but a visual census of the empire's vast reach, a reminder of how many people were under the Persian thumb. And talk about a diverse cast. Picture this: craftsmen from Egypt, Greece, and Babylon, all contributing their own flair to the grand tapestry of Persepolis. This wasn't just an artistic choice, but a political one, reinforcing the idea of a united empire. Darius knew the value of showcasing harmony, even if the reality was a bit more, shall we say, fractious. The empire was a patchwork quilt of cultures, and Persepolis was its centerpiece, a symbol of both unity and control. Speaking of control, let's not forget the role of Persepolis as a stage for political theater. The city was a hotspot for gatherings that put the G7 summit to shame. The annual Nowruz festival, celebrating the Persian New Year, was not just a party but a diplomatic bonanza. Delegates from across the empire gathered here to wine, dine, and pledge allegiance to the king. Gifts were exchanged, oaths were sworn, and alliances were forged, all under the watchful eyes of those stone guardians. But while the diplomats rubbed elbows and traded pleasantries, the real work of empire building continued behind the scenes. Persepolis was more than just a backdrop for political drama. It was a hub of bureaucratic activity, where the business of empire was conducted with relentless efficiency. The empire's vast bureaucracy was a machine that needed constant oiling, and Persepolis was both the heart and the engine room. Now, let's debunk a myth while we're at it. The idea that Persepolis was merely a playground for the elite. Sure, the upper crust might have had their fill of banquets and ceremonies, but the city was also a bustling center of administration. It was here that the empire's vast network of satrapies was managed, where edicts were issued, and where the wheels of governance turned. The city was a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where the ceremonial met the practical. Yet for all its pomp and pageantry, Persepolis was not immune to the challenges of ruling a sprawling empire. The very diversity that the city celebrated was also its Achilles heel. Keeping the many cultures and regions in line required a delicate balancing act, one that demanded both carrot and stick. Darius's policy of tolerance was as much a necessity as it was a gesture of goodwill. Allowing subjects to maintain their traditions was a smart move, but it required constant vigilance to prevent unrest. Economically, Persepolis was a symbol of the empire's wealth, but it was also a reminder of the costs of maintaining such grandeur. The construction and upkeep of the city were a drain on resources, a colossal investment that required a steady stream of revenue. The empire's coffers were filled by a combination of taxes, tribute, and a well-oiled system of trade routes. Yet, the same vastness that provided riches also posed logistical nightmares. Let's not gloss over the human element either. The laborers who built Persepolis were drawn from all corners of the empire, a testament to its reach and its ability to marshal resources. These workers, often overlooked in the grand narrative, were the backbone of Darius's vision. They toiled in the shadows of the grand columns, their sweat and toil immortalized not in stone, but in the city's very foundation. Despite the sweat and stone, Persepolis thrived as a cultural melting pot. The city was a confluence of languages, customs, and beliefs, a place where ideas were exchanged as freely as goods. This cultural exchange was not just a byproduct of empire, but a driving force behind its innovation and resilience. The Persians were adept at borrowing the best from their subjects, be it technology, art, or governance, and making it their own. In the end, Persepolis was more than just a pretty face. It was the beating heart of an empire, a testament to both the potential and the perils of human ambition. It was a place where dreams were etched into stone, where power was both celebrated and challenged. And as the sun set over its ruins, casting long shadows over the silent columns, it stood as a reminder of the heights of human achievement and the inevitability of change. As we wrap up this part of our journey, keep in mind that Persepolis was a stage where the drama of empire played out in all its glory and complexity. The city tells a story of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of greatness, tempered by the harsh realities of politics and power. And as we look to the next chapter, let's remember that while Persepolis may have been a symbol of an empire's might, it was also a reflection of its fragility, a theme we'll explore further as we continue to unravel the ancient tapestry of Persia. And so, as we transition from the drama of Persepolis' bustling heyday, we must strap in for the grand finale, a tale of fire, ambition, and a touch of hubris. You see, Persepolis wasn't just a jewel in the Persian crown. It was a target with a bullseye as big as the empire itself. Enter Alexander the Great, the Macedonian wonderkind with a penchant for empire building, and as it turns out, empire burning. In 330 BCE, Alexander waltzed into Persepolis, riding the wave of his conquests like a rock star on a world tour. His army, fueled by victories, and perhaps a bit too much adrenaline, saw the city not just as a prize, but as the ultimate trophy. And what do you do with a trophy when you've already got all the glory? Apparently, you set it on fire. Legend has it that the torching of Persepolis was the result of a drunken dare, a sort of ancient frat party gone horribly awry. But let's not oversimplify this into a mere act of vandalism. Alexander's decision was as much strategic as it was symbolic, a fiery exclamation point to his conquest of Persia. As the flames devoured the city, they consumed more than just stone and wood. They swallowed up a symbol of the Achaemenid Empire's might, leaving behind charred ruins and a hefty dose of irony. Here was a place that had stood as a testament to human achievement, brought down by the very force it sought to exemplify, ambition. It's like building a skyscraper, only to realize you've misplaced the blueprints for the fire escape. But what did this fiery end reveal about human nature? For one, it showcased the double-edged sword of ambition. Persepolis was built on dreams of grandeur, but in the end, it was consumed by the ambitions of another. Alexander's act was both a testament to his own vision of empire and a stark reminder of the transience of power. In the grand scheme of history, it's a tale as old as time. Today's conqueror is tomorrow's conquered. Now, let's not forget the economic and political ripple effects of this blaze. The destruction of Persepolis was a blow to the Achaemenid administrative network, a system that had managed to keep a sprawling empire running like a well-oiled chariot. The satraps, those regional bigwigs who kept the tribute and taxes flowing, suddenly found themselves without a central hub. It was as if the empire's motherboard had been fried, and the resulting chaos was an opportunity for Alexander to mold the region to his liking. Yet, for all the destruction, Persepolis left an indelible mark on history, both in the physical remnants and the metaphorical echoes that linger in our modern world. Today, the ruins stand as silent witnesses to a bygone era, their grandeur reduced to weathered stone and scattered columns. But don't be fooled by their silence. These ruins speak volumes. They remind us of the heights of human creativity and the depths of our folly. They are a testament to the fact that even the mightiest structures can be brought low by the simplest of elements: fire, ambition, and a little too much wine. In our age of glass skyscrapers and concrete jungles, Persepolis offers a poignant reflection. Sure, our buildings might reach for the clouds, but like the Persians, we must grapple with the impermanence of our creations. We live in a world where technology changes in the blink of an eye and power dynamics shift faster than you can say Silicon Valley. The story of Persepolis is a reminder that while our ambitions may soar, they remain tethered to the ground by the realities of human nature. But why does Persepolis continue to captivate us? Perhaps it's because, in those ruins, we see ourselves, a species driven by dreams and tempered by our own limitations. We are the architects of our own destinies, yet we are also at the mercy of forces beyond our control. Persepolis stands as a mirror, reflecting both our potential and our hubris. It's a cautionary tale wrapped in a marvel of engineering, a reminder that history has a way of repeating itself, often with a twist of irony. As we wrap up this historical journey, let's step back and take stock of the lessons Persepolis has to offer. It teaches us about ambition and its ability to both create and destroy. It shows us the power of unity and the fragility of even the most impressive empires. And it challenges us to look beyond the romanticized versions of history to see the realities that lie beneath the surface. In doing so, we gain a deeper appreciation for the stories etched in the stones of Persepolis and the echoes they leave in our modern world. So, as you drift off to sleep, let your thoughts wander back to that ancient city in the desert. Imagine the columns rising into the sky, the reliefs telling stories of power and tribute. Picture Alexander's flames dancing in the night, casting shadows over the ruins. Remember that while the city may have fallen, its legacy endures, a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of our ambition. And isn't that the ultimate takeaway? That even in the ashes of defeat, there is a story waiting to be told, a lesson waiting to be learned. Elizabeth Cady Stanton might have kicked off her life like any other 19th century girl, but it wasn't long before her story veered off into uncharted territory. Born on November 12, 1815, in Johnstown, New York, Elizabeth grew up in a world where women were more ornamental than influential. It's the kind of world where a woman's worth was measured by the neatness of her needlework and the number of pies she could bake, not the sharpness of her mind. But little Elizabeth was not having it. Her father, Daniel Cady, was a notable judge and a congressman, a man with a mind as sharp as a tack and a household full of books. Elizabeth, being the curious creature she was, devoured these books like candy. Now, you might think a judge would be delighted to have a daughter so intellectually inclined. But the 19th century had other ideas. Daniel Cady was actually more interested in his sons taking up the mantle. Unfortunately for him, those sons didn't stick around long enough to fulfill his expectations. Elizabeth's brother Eleazar, the chosen one, died young, leaving Elizabeth to hear her father lament, "Oh, my daughter, I wish you were a boy." Now, that's the kind of comment that could send anyone into a lifelong identity crisis, but not Elizabeth. No, she took it as a challenge. If her father wanted a son to carry his intellectual legacy, she would do it, just without the pesky gender reassignment. She decided to become a force in her own right, proving that girls could be just as formidable as any boy. Elizabeth's education was rich, considering the time. She attended Johnstown Academy, where she was one of the few girls in a sea of testosterone, and she excelled. By the age of 16, she was ready to take on Troy Female Seminary, an institution founded by Emma Willard, a pioneer in women's education. Troy Seminary was no finishing school. It was where young women went to learn things that might actually be useful, like mathematics and philosophy, not just how to curtsy and sip tea without spilling. While attending Troy, Elizabeth became quite the scholar, but she also witnessed firsthand the glaring disparities between men and women. She saw how women were discouraged from pursuing subjects deemed too intellectual, and she wasn't impressed. Instead, she began to formulate ideas about women's rights, ideas that would blossom into a full-blown movement. It was a slow burn, though, because back then, the only thing more unwanted than a smart woman was a smart woman who had opinions. Now, let's talk about how love and political strategy tangled up Elizabeth's life in a way that would make any soap opera writer proud. Enter Henry Brewster Stanton, an abolitionist and vigorous orator who caught Elizabeth's eye and heart. They met through mutual social reform circles, and their relationship was as much about politics as it was about romance. Henry was a staunch supporter of the anti-slavery movement, and his fiery speeches were legendary. Elizabeth, captivated by his ideals, and let's be honest, more than a little by him, saw a partnership that could be both personally fulfilling and politically advantageous. In 1840, the couple decided to marry, but not without a little drama. Elizabeth insisted on omitting the word obey from her wedding vows, a scandalous move at the time. This was 1840, remember, when the idea of a wife not promising to obey her husband was akin to suggesting that cats and dogs should start living together. But Elizabeth was adamant. She was marrying a man, not joining a convent. Their marriage was a meeting of minds as much as it was of hearts. Elizabeth and Henry's honeymoon was less about romantic strolls and more about radical activism. They traveled to London for the World Anti-Slavery Convention, eager to join the fight for abolition. But surprise, surprise, Elizabeth found herself sidelined because of her gender. The convention organizers, in their infinite wisdom, decided that women should be seen and not heard, relegating them to the back of the room like naughty schoolchildren. This experience was a pivotal moment for Elizabeth, highlighting the absurdity of fighting for freedom while being denied her own rights simply because of her gender. This was the spark she needed. If her father's comment had lit the match, the London conference poured gasoline on the fire. Elizabeth returned to the United States with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to tackle the beast of women's suffrage head-on. She may not have been able to speak at the convention, but she would make sure her voice was heard back home. The stakes were high, and the journey was long, but Elizabeth Cady Stanton was not one to shy away from a challenge. She was smart, she was driven, and she was just getting started. Her early life set the stage for a crusade that would upend societal norms and pave the way for future generations. And as for her father's wish for a son, let's just say Elizabeth more than exceeded his expectations, proving that sometimes the best man for the job is a woman. As if Elizabeth needed any more fire in her belly, her return from the London conference was only the beginning of the whirlwind. Enter Susan B. Anthony, stage right. Now, if history is a play, these two were the dynamic duo, Batman and Robin of the suffrage movement, minus the capes, but with plenty of crusading zeal. Their partnership was not just a meeting of minds. It was the start of a movement that would shake the very foundations of societal norms. Elizabeth and Susan first crossed paths in the 1850s, thanks to a mutual friend, Amelia Bloomer. Yes, that's right. The very same Amelia Bloomer who popularized those puffy pantaloon-like garments that scandalized polite society. But back to our leading ladies. Susan was as single-minded as they come, a Quaker with a penchant for no-nonsense pragmatism and a wardrobe as severe as her focus. While Elizabeth was the thinker, the rider, the philosopher of the pair, Susan was the organizer, the strategist, the one who could get things done. Together, they were a force of nature, like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Elizabeth the rich aroma, Susan the caffeine kick. Their partnership officially kicked off in 1851, and they quickly realized they needed a platform, a big one. Cue the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, the very first women's rights convention in the United States, which Elizabeth had already helped organize. This was the Woodstock of women's rights, minus the mud and rock bands, but with plenty of revolutionary spirit. Held at the Westline Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York, this gathering was a bold statement. About 300 people showed up, which, for the 1840s, was practically a marsh pit of progressive thinking. Now, organizing this event was no small feat. Picture trying to plan a wedding with no Pinterest, no internet, and no reliable postal service. Elizabeth, along with fellow agitators like Lucretia Mott and Mary Ann McClintock, cobbled together what they could. It was a logistical nightmare, like trying to herd cats, but the cats are all busy breaking down the patriarchy. The convention produced the Declaration of Sentiments, a document modeled after the Declaration of Independence, which boldly proclaimed that all men and women are created equal. It was a revolutionary idea, and it had all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. The document listed 18 grievances, including the lack of women's suffrage, the inability to own property, and the absence of educational opportunities. It was signed by 68 women and 32 men, a daring act of defiance in a world still figuring out what to do with educated women. Elizabeth's role in this convention wasn't just as an organizer. She was the keynote speaker, delivering a speech that was as fiery as it was eloquent. Picture her standing there, a woman in a crinoline dress, yet speaking with a voice that could cut through the silence like a hot knife through butter. Her words resonated, and they echoed far beyond the walls of that chapel. Enter Susan, whose work alongside Elizabeth would help turn these ideas into action. They launched into a nationwide campaign for women's rights, a quest that involved traveling thousands of miles, often by horse-drawn carriage or steam locomotive. And let's not sugarcoat it, folks. This was a time when travel was less about convenience and more about survival. Think long, bumpy rides over dirt roads, where the only thing more treacherous than the journey was the public's reaction to their message. In the face of constant opposition, they soldiered on. Susan, with her relentless energy, would often take to the road, speaking at rallies and organizing events, while Elizabeth, tethered by her growing family, wielded her pen like a weapon. Their correspondence was prolific, with letters flying back and forth, filled with strategy, encouragement, and the occasional venting session about the challenges they faced. Imagine two generals planning a campaign, but instead of armies, they were marshalling ideas and words. Their crusade wasn't just about speeches and pamphlets. It was about changing hearts and minds. And oh boy, was it an uphill battle. They faced derision from the press, dismissals from politicians, and outright hostility from many quarters. Yet they pressed on, because they knew that the status quo wasn't just wrong, it was untenable. In a world where women were expected to be seen and not heard, Elizabeth and Susan were loud, proud, and unapologetic. They weren't just fighting for the right to vote, they were fighting for the right to be. And while they didn't live to see the fruits of their labor, the 19th Amendment granting women the vote would come in 1920, long after their deaths. The seeds they planted were growing. So there you have it, the beginnings of a partnership that would change history. A friendship forged in the fires of activism, fueled by a shared vision of equality. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were more than just allies. They were pioneers, blazing a trail for future generations. Their story is one of courage, conviction, and the unyielding belief that a better world was not only possible but necessary. And as for those logistical nightmares and humorous misadventures, well, let's just say that even superheroes have their off days, but that never stopped them from saving the world. Now, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony's relentless campaign for women's rights setting the stage. Let's dive into what could be described as one of the boldest moves of Stanton's career, her audacious foray into religious critique with the Woman's Bible. Imagine the scene. It's the late 19th century, and Stanton, ever the intellectual provocateur, decides it's high time to tackle the sacred cow of religion. Why? Because she believed that religion was one of the main culprits keeping women in subjugation. The Bible, she argued, had been wielded like a weapon to keep women in their place, and she was ready to challenge that narrative. So, in 1895, Stanton published The Woman's Bible, a two-part commentary that sought to dissect and reinterpret the scriptures from a feminist perspective. Now, this wasn't just a casual weekend project. It was a full-on scholarly endeavor, involving a committee of women who pored over biblical texts. The goal, to demonstrate that the often-cited passages used to justify women's inferiority were not only misinterpreted, but were also products of a patriarchal society that had twisted the original meanings to suit its purposes. Stanton didn't mince words. She was critical, she was irreverent, and she was unapologetic. She saw the Bible as a document that had been manipulated over centuries to reinforce the notion that women were the secondary sex. Her work was a direct challenge to religious orthodoxy, and she was prepared for the fallout, or so she thought. The backlash was as swift as it was fierce. Many who had been her allies in the women's suffrage movement suddenly found themselves at odds with her. The National American Woman Suffrage Association, NAWSA, which Stanton herself had helped found, distanced itself from the Woman's Bible. They worried that her controversial views on religion would alienate potential supporters and derail the suffrage movement. In their 1896 convention, NAWSA officially disassociated itself from the project, a move akin to a public shunning in the age of Twitter. Naturally, Stanton wasn't about to back down. In her typical wry fashion, she pointed out the irony of their concerns. If they were fighting for women's rights, shouldn't they also fight for the right to question oppressive doctrines? She maintained her sense of humor, even as she faced criticism from friends and foes alike. Stanton quipped that she was too busy to be angry, which, if nothing else, is a masterclass in maintaining grace under fire. But let's not paint this picture with pure heroism and ignore the complexities of Stanton's approach. Yes, she was an intellectual heavyweight, unafraid of taking on the establishment, but her methods were divisive. Some argued that her focus on religion was a distraction from the pressing issue of suffrage. Others felt she was too radical, that her ideas were ahead of their time, though that's often a euphemism for you're making us uncomfortable. Yet, Stanton's gamble on the Woman's Bible was more than just a controversial blip in her career. It underscored a critical point about the suffrage movement itself. It was not a monolith. Within its ranks were women of various beliefs and strategies, each with their own vision of what true equality entailed. Stanton's work highlighted the intersection of gender, religion, and politics in a way that forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about societal norms. From an economic standpoint, Stanton's critique of religious structures also pointed to the way these systems perpetuated economic dependency. She argued that by keeping women in domestic roles, religion was complicit in economic inequality. Women were not just fighting for the vote, they were fighting for the right to work, to earn, and to be financially independent, factors that were crucial for true liberation. In an era when the average annual wage for women was a fraction of what men earned, often less than $300, the economic dimension of her critique was not just relevant, it was essential. So, while the Woman's Bible might not have been a bestseller, it was a catalyst for discussion and debate. It forced the movement to grapple with the broader implications of women's rights beyond just the ballot box. It was a reminder that the fight for equality was as much about challenging ideas as it was about changing laws. Stanton, ever the pragmatist, knew that revolutions aren't built on consensus, but on courage. Her willingness to tackle religion head-on showed that she wasn't just a suffragist. She was an iconoclast. She was willing to take the heat if it meant pushing the boundaries of what was possible for women. And while the Woman's Bible might not have been her most celebrated achievement, it was undoubtedly one of her most daring. In the end, Stanton's story is a testament to the power of questioning the status quo. She didn't just ask for change, she demanded it. With a pen as sharp as her wit, and a resolve as unyielding as her vision for a better world. The backlash she faced was intense, but it never diminished her spirit. If anything, it underscored her belief that the road to equality was a long one, filled with bumps, detours, and the occasional storm, but one worth traveling all the same. As we pause in our narrative, remember that Stanton's journey was far from over. Her life was a tapestry of triumphs and tribulations, a relentless pursuit of justice that would continue to inspire generations. So stay tuned, because the story of Elizabeth Cady Stanton is a saga, not a short story, and there's plenty more to unravel. As we continue unraveling the saga of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, it becomes clear that her activism was like an ever-expanding universe, constantly reaching into new realms, from abolition to labor rights. For Stanton, the fight for equality wasn't confined to the narrow corridors of voting booths. It sprawled across a landscape riddled with issues just as pressing, if not more so. If you thought she was just about waving a Votes for Women banner, think again. She was the Swiss Army knife of social reform, equipped to tackle a variety of injustices. Now, let's talk abolition, a cause that was practically woven into the fabric of Stanton's life. This wasn't just a side quest, it was a core mission, intertwined with her push for women's rights. You could say she was a multitasking pioneer. Unlike your average 19th century activist who might focus on a single issue, Stanton was juggling the societal equivalent of flaming torches. She understood that the fight against slavery and the fight for women's rights were two sides of the same coin. Both were about dismantling systems that thrived on subjugation and inequality. Stanton's commitment to abolition was deeply personal. Her marriage to Henry Brewster Stanton, the abolitionist orator, was a partnership built on shared values. Together, they were a kind of 19th century power couple, not the red carpet type, but the kind you'd find in the trenches of social reform. Henry's speeches could rally a crowd, while Elizabeth's pen could rally a movement. And though they didn't always see eye to eye, more on that later, their shared vision for a more just society was never in question. But let's not gloss over the complexities here. Stanton's abolitionist stance was not without its controversies. She was part of a movement that was often divided along lines of strategy and priorities. Some abolitionists viewed women's rights as a distraction from the more urgent matter of ending slavery. Others, like Stanton, argued that the two causes were inseparable. This tension wasn't just theoretical. It played out in meetings, speeches, and sometimes heated debates. It was like trying to organize a family reunion where half the relatives refused to talk to the other half. In 1866, Stanton and Susan B. Anthony formed the American Equal Rights Association, a bold attempt to unite the causes of women's suffrage and racial equality. It was a noble idea, but like many noble ideas, it was fraught with challenges. The association aimed to secure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of race or gender, an ambitious agenda in a nation still reeling from the Civil War. But unity proved elusive, and the organization eventually splintered over disagreements about whether to support the 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote, but excluded women. This was a pivotal moment for Stanton, and not one of her most shining. She and Anthony opposed the amendment, arguing that it was unjust to enfranchise black men while leaving all women disenfranchised. This stance alienated many of their former allies in the abolitionist movement and underscored a racial tension that haunted the suffrage movement. It's a reminder that even pioneers can stumble, and that the road to equality is often littered with moral potholes. But before you write Stanton off as an irredeemable figure, let's look at her foray into labor rights, an area where her vision was undeniably ahead of its time. Stanton believed that economic independence was crucial for women's empowerment. She understood that the right to vote was only part of the equation. Women also needed the means to support themselves. In an era when women were often paid a pittance for their labor, if they were allowed to work at all, Stanton argued for fair wages and better working conditions. In 1868, she became the first woman to run for Congress, though her bid was largely symbolic. She knew she wouldn't win, but her candidacy was a statement, a declaration that women had a right to participate in the political process at every level. It was as if she was saying, if you won't give us a seat at the table, we'll bring our own chairs. Her campaign highlighted issues like the wage gap and the need for labor reforms, topics that were as relevant then as they are today. Now, it's easy to get swept up in the headlines of her public life, but let's not forget that Elizabeth Cady Stanton was also a mother of 7. Yes, you heard that right. 7 kids. It's like she was running her own personal daycare while simultaneously trying to change the world. If you've ever tried to juggle work and family, imagine adding a social justice crusade to the mix. Just picturing the logistics is enough to make your head spin. Stanton's ability to balance motherhood with activism was nothing short of remarkable. Her children grew up in a household that was a hotbed of intellectual activity and social reform. Imagine dinner table conversations that ranged from the latest political strategies to the finer points of Latin grammar. It's safe to say that the Stanton household wasn't your typical 19th century family setting. She often wrote her speeches and articles with children underfoot, proving that the personal is political and sometimes chaotic. But let's not romanticize it too much. Stanton's dual roles came with their own set of challenges. She faced criticism for being a mother who dared to have a public life, a notion that was scandalous at the time. In a world where a woman's place was supposed to be in the home, Stanton's activism was seen by some as neglectful. Yet she persevered, showing that women could be both caregivers and change-makers. Stanton's life was a constant balancing act, one where she had to weigh her responsibilities as a mother against her commitment to social justice. It was a tightrope walk, but she managed it with a tenacity that was as impressive as it was inspiring. Her ability to navigate these dual roles spoke volumes about her commitment to her cause and her belief that women could and should have it all. In the grand tapestry of history, Elizabeth Cady Stanton is a figure who defies easy categorization. She was bold, brilliant, and occasionally flawed. Her activism spanned issues that were both interconnected and sometimes in tension with each other. She was a woman who dared to challenge the status quo at every turn, even when it meant facing criticism from her peers. And while she didn't see the full fruits of her labor in her lifetime, her legacy is a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of intersectional activism. As we dig deeper into Stanton's life, it's clear that her story is far from over. Her journey through the turbulent waters of social reform offers lessons that are as relevant today as they were in the 19th century. So as we pause here, remember that Elizabeth Cady Stanton was more than a suffragist icon. She was a trailblazer in every sense of the word, navigating a path that was uniquely her own. And as for what's next, well, let's just say there's plenty more to explore. Stay tuned. As we dive into the final chapter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's saga, let's take a moment to savor the irony. Here was a woman who spent her life fighting for the right to vote, yet she didn't live to see the day when women finally walked into polling stations without needing a man's permission slip. Talk about a plot twist worthy of a Greek tragedy. Right. Stanton passed away in 1902, full 18 years before the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, granting women across the United States the long-denied right to vote. The 19th Amendment wasn't just a legal change. It was the result of decades of tireless campaigning, protests, and yes, even a sprinkle of civil disobedience. It was a hard-fought victory, not the kind that unfolds in a neat, linear narrative. This was more like a roller coaster of setbacks and triumphs, with suffragists like Stanton laying the groundwork and others picking up the baton. It's worth noting that Stanton wasn't the only one who didn't see this victory. Susan B. Anthony, her lifelong partner in suffrage crime, also missed it by 14 years. Now let's talk legacy, because Stanton left a mark deeper than any chiseled marble statue could convey. Her life was a testament to the idea that change often starts with a whisper, but requires a shout to be heard. She was the intellectual powerhouse who dared to question the very fabric of societal norms, and for that, she was both lauded and lambasted. Her legacy is like a complex tapestry, rich, colorful, but with a few frayed edges. One of the myths about Stanton is the romanticized notion of her as a one-woman army, single-handedly paving the way for women's rights. While she was indeed a force of nature, she was also part of a broader movement with countless women and men who contributed to the cause. The reality is, no one does it alone. Her story reminds us that while individual actions matter, collective effort is what truly drives change. On the flip side, Stanton wasn't without her controversies. Her opposition to the 15th Amendment which prioritized racial equality over gender, left a sour note that still resonates today. She and Anthony's stance alienated them from many in the abolitionist community, highlighting the racial tensions that were, and still are, part of the suffrage movement. This isn't just a footnote. It's a reminder that progress isn't always pretty. Yet, Stanton's vision extended beyond suffrage. She was a vocal advocate for women's economic independence, understanding that financial freedom was just as crucial as the right to vote. In an era when women were expected to rely on their husbands for financial support, Stanton's call for economic empowerment was nothing short of revolutionary. She knew that without financial autonomy, true equality was a pipe dream. And let's not forget her daring critique of religion with the Woman's Bible. It wasn't just about reinterpreting scripture. It was about challenging the structures that had kept women in subservience for centuries. Stanton faced a tidal wave of backlash for this, including from her own allies. But she wasn't deterred. She understood that challenging deeply ingrained beliefs was like trying to turn a cruise ship with a rowboat, slow, arduous, but essential if you want to change course. So, what can we glean from Stanton's life? For starters, that the fight for equality is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about laying groundwork, planting seeds, and understanding that you might not be the one to see them bloom. Her work was unfinished, but that doesn't diminish its impact. It's a reminder that every step forward is built on the backs of those who dared to challenge the status quo. Stanton's story is also a cautionary tale about the perils of putting movements on pedestals. The suffrage movement was flawed, rife with its own internal conflicts and contradictions, but those imperfections are part of what makes its story so compelling. It wasn't just a straight line to victory. It was a messy, complex journey with lessons that still resonate today. In the end, Stanton's legacy is as much about the questions she raised as the answers she provided. She forced society to confront uncomfortable truths and dared to imagine a world where women were equals in all spheres of life. Her life was a blend of brilliance and blunder, a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of questioning everything. As we wrap up this historical odyssey, remember that Stanton's story is far from a relic of the past. Her life's work continues to inspire and challenge us, proving that while the arc of history might bend toward justice, it's the push from determined individuals that gets it there. So here's to Elizabeth Cady Stanton, an icon, an iconoclast, and a reminder that the fight for equality is as relevant today as it was in her time. You snap awake in Tudor England, where the morning chill bites harder than a debt collector's knock. Congratulations! You're now a cook in the 16th century, a time when breakfast is less of a gourmet affair and more of a survival strategy. The rooster crows, not as a gentle wake-up call, but as a reminder that you've got a mountain of work ahead, and no snooze button in sight. Now, let's talk bread, the cornerstone of every Tudor meal. You might think bread is simple, but welcome to the 1500, where baking involves more arithmetic than your average algebra class. You've got to figure out how to stretch your wheat supply, which is no easy feat, given that a loaf costs about a penny, a hefty chunk of change when your yearly income is around £6. Don't mess up the math, otherwise you're not just dealing with a burnt crust, but a financial crisis. The bread you're baking isn't your modern supermarket fluff loaf. Nope, it's a farthing loaf, named after the coin it costs. But what's in it? Well, if you're lucky, you've got wheat. If not, it's a mystery mix of whatever grains are hanging around. Think of it as the mystery meat of bread, just with more potential splinters. And while you're kneading dough, let's chew over the economics. Bread is serious business. In a world where grain harvests can make or break a kingdom, the price of bread is a political barometer, so much so that the assize of bread and ale, a medieval regulation, still influences prices by the 1500. If you think modern food regulations are a headache, try keeping track of a system where the price of bread is tied to the weight of a silver penny. But hey, what's bread without a drink? Enter ale, which flows more freely than water, partly because it's safer. Tudor water sources are about as reliable as a Tudor doctor. Ale, on the other hand, is a fermented wonder, purifying the water and keeping people hydrated and happy, or at least not thirsty. As a cook, knowing your ale gallons is crucial, since serving the wrong measure could cost you your job, or worse, your head. You'd better remember, an ale gallon is about 282 cubic inches, not the 231 cubic inches of a modern gallon. Yes, even your liquids come with a math test attached. Now, back to the kitchen, where Tudor cooks are the unsung heroes of the household. You're juggling more than just loaves and ale. You're managing a team of scullery boys and kitchen maids, each with less experience than a first-year intern at a startup. And the stakes? High. A single mistake could ruin a meal or, even worse, offend your employer. And offending the nobility, not an option unless you fancy a swift career change to dungeon dweller. So why does all this bread and ale business matter? Because in Tudor England, food isn't just sustenance, it's power. Control the bread and you control the people. Fail to provide it and you risk unrest. The bread riots of the 1590s weren't just about hunger, they were about survival and dignity. When the price of grain skyrocketed, so did tempers. Bread was more than a meal. It was a symbol of stability and fairness, or the lack thereof. But don't romanticize it too much. The daily life of a Tudor cook is hard graft with little glory. You're a cog in the vast machine of a household, laboring away before the sun rises and after it sets. Yet without you, the household grinds to a halt. So you rise with the dawn, face a day that's a marathon of mixing, kneading, and brewing, and hope to make it through without a catastrophic miscalculation. With each successful loaf, you're not just feeding mouths, you're feeding an economy, a society, and indirectly a kingdom. And that's a slice of history worth savoring. Now, as the sun inches higher, and the kitchen begins to hum with the clatter of pots and pans, it's time to peel back the layers of Tudor kitchen life. It's like peeling an onion, but without the tears, hopefully. You're not just here to whip up a meal, you're navigating a social ladder that's as rigid as a knight's codpiece. The master cook stands at the helm, a culinary captain steering a ship full of chaos and ambition. But don't let the title fool you into thinking he's the top dog. In the Tudor household hierarchy, he's king of the kitchen, but still a pawn to the lord of the manor. Think of the master cook as the Gordon Ramsay of his day, minus the TV cameras and the expletives, though I wouldn't rule those out entirely. He's got the power to make or break your day, your meal, and possibly your career. His word is law, and breaking it could land you in harder water than the soup du jour. But don't be too quick to envy his position. While he's got authority, he's also got the responsibility to ensure that every dish is fit for a king, or at least the local gentry. Mess up, and his head's on the chopping block, metaphorically speaking, usually. Hierarchy in a Tudor kitchen is a game of thrones on a smaller scale. Below the master cook are the undercooks, who learn the trade while dodging both flying saucepans and political pitfalls. Then you have the scullery boys and kitchen maids, who are the real workhorses, scrubbing parts and peeling vegetables until their hands are as tough as leather. And let's not forget the spit boys, who, quite literally, turn the meat on the spit for hours on end. It's a job so monotonous it makes watching paint dry seem like a carnival ride, but it's a crucial one. Burn the roast for the Lord's feast, and you might find yourself demoted to chasing rats out of the pantry. And speaking of feasts, let's debunk a myth or two. We often imagine Tudor dining tables groaning under the weight of extravagant banquets, with more courses than you can count on both hands. Sure, those lavish spreads did exist, but they were reserved for special occasions like weddings or visits from the monarch. On a regular day, the menu was more likely to feature pottage, a kind of thick stew made from whatever was lying around the kitchen. It's the culinary equivalent of clean out your fridge night. But why is this hierarchy so important, you ask? Because in the Tudor world, your place in the kitchen reflects your place in society. The kitchen is a microcosm of the kingdom, with its own rules, politics, and power struggles. The master cook might wield a ladle like a scepter, but he's still subject to the whims of his noble employers. And those employers, well, they're constantly maneuvering to climb the social ladder themselves, hosting grand feasts to showcase their wealth and curry favor with the higher-ups. It's a delicate dance where one wrong step, like serving a dish that's too cold or too salty, can lead to social disaster. Now, let's talk economics, because in the Tudor kitchen, everything has a price. The cost of ingredients is a constant concern, especially when a bad harvest can send prices soaring higher than a falcon on a hunt. A kitchen that goes over budget risks the wrath of the steward, the man who holds the purse strings. And while the master cook might be a culinary genius, he's also a budget manager, tasked with balancing the books while satisfying the palate. It's a balancing act worthy of a tightrope walker, and one misstep could mean financial ruin, not just for the kitchen, but for the entire household. And then there's the politics. The kitchen is a hotbed of intrigue, where alliances are forged over a shared loaf of bread and rivalries simmer like a pot of stew. Everyone's vying for a better position or a bigger share of the pie, literally and figuratively. The kitchen is where the ambitious can make their mark, but it's also where they can meet their downfall, make the right connections, and you might find yourself moving up the ranks, but cross the wrong person, and you could be out on your ear faster than you can say pigeon pie. So, as you stir the pot and keep one eye on the master cook, remember that you're not just preparing a meal. You're playing a part in a grand social performance, where every dish is a status symbol and every bite is a taste of power. The Tudor kitchen might be a place of hard work and humble fare, but it's also a stage where the drama of life plays out in daily bread and common ale. And while the myths of sumptuous feasts may linger, the reality is a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes, feeding not just bodies, but ambitions and aspirations as well. Stay sharp, because the kitchen is no place for the faint-hearted. It's a battlefield of flavors and fortunes, where the stakes are as high as the towering pies that sometimes grace the table. And while the myth of the Tudor feast may capture the imagination, it's the reality of the daily grind that truly tells the tale. As the clock strikes midday, you might expect a Tudor lunchtime to resemble something straight out of a medieval fairy tale. Spoiler alert, it's more pit stop than palatial banquet. Sure, the nobility occasionally indulged in meals that looked like a Renaissance painting come to life, but for the rest of us mere mortals, lunchtime was a practical affair fought against the backdrop of a kitchen that was more inferno than inspiration. Open hearths were the norm, providing not just heat for cooking, but also the occasional third-degree burn. It's hard to romanticize a setting where the biggest challenge isn't crafting a culinary masterpiece, but avoiding setting yourself on fire. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Tudor cooking, where practicality ruled the day. The open hearth was both a heart and headache of the Tudor kitchen. Imagine a setup that's part barbecue, part medieval death trap, a roaring fire, swinging parts, and an ever-present risk of your stew doubling as a fire hazard. For all its charm, this hearth was less about gourmet artistry and more about survival. Cooking here meant navigating a minefield where one misstep could lead to charred eyebrows or a singed tunic. The ingredients tossed into those cauldrons depended largely on your station in life. If you were a commoner, your menu was likely as humble as your bank account. Think grains, vegetables, and the occasional sliver of meat if you were lucky. Pardage, the thick stew we mentioned earlier, was a staple, often concocted from leftovers and spiced with a dash of desperation. Meanwhile, the gentry dined on more exotic fare, swan, peacock, or perhaps a roast boar if they wanted to flaunt their wealth. But let's not kid ourselves. Even the poshest of Tudor spreads was far from today's Michelin-starred dining experience. The differences in diet weren't just about taste. They were a direct reflection of economic disparity. Take saffron, for instance. This spice was the Tudor equivalent of gold dust. A pound could set you back the equivalent of several months' wages, making it the ultimate status symbol. You didn't just sprinkle saffron on your dish. You flaunted it like a Tudor fashionista showing off the season's latest ruff. Meanwhile, cooks in humbler households had to be more resourceful than a squirrel in winter, stretching every ingredient to its limit and beyond. But let's not get too starry-eyed about the nobility's lavish spreads. Those sumptuous Tudor banquets we all imagine, reserved for special occasions, often as rare as a solar eclipse. Day-to-day dining was far more modest, even for the well-heeled. And while a feast might feature a staggering array of dishes, remember that Tudor health codes were less stringent than a pirate's code of ethics. Food poisoning was practically a rite of passage, and the only cure was a hearty dose of medieval fortitude. Despite the romanticized images of Tudor revelry, the reality was often less about luxury and more about logistics. Consider the logistics of feeding a household where the kitchen staff was a small army in itself. Every meal required coordination that would make a modern-day event planner weep. The master cook, that culinary commander we met earlier, juggled duties akin to those of a military general, orchestrating every dish with the precision of a well-timed siege. His job was less about personal glory and more about ensuring that every meal was fit for the table, and the reputation of the household. Economic factors played a starring role in shaping the Tudor diet. Harvests were unpredictable, and a bad one could send grain prices soaring like a falcon on the hunt. This volatility meant that cooks had to be as adept with numbers as they were with knives. An overcooked roast was one thing, but an overdrawn budget was a disaster of epic proportions. In a world where a loaf of bread could incite riots, the kitchen was not just a place of culinary creativity, but a battleground of economic survival. In this high-stakes environment, creativity was the secret ingredient. Cooks became culinary MacGyvers, stretching ingredients further than a court jester's patience. Leftovers were reinvented, and nothing went to waste. This resourcefulness wasn't just a necessity. It was a skill honed through necessity, a testament to the resilience of those who labored tirelessly over hot hearths and bubbling pots. The Tudor kitchen was a cacophony of sounds, a symphony of clanging pots and crackling fires. Yet beneath this chaos lay a rhythm as precise as any courtly dance. Every chop, stir, and seasoning was a step in a complex ballet, with each member of the kitchen staff playing their part. From the lowliest scullery maid to the esteemed master cook, everyone had a role to play in the grand theatre of Tudor dining. And speaking of roles, let's not forget the economic puppeteer behind the scenes, the steward. This financial wizard wielded the household budget like a maestro with a baton. A single miscalculation, and the entire operation could crumble faster than a poorly made pie crust. The steward's vigilance ensured the kitchen remained within budget, balancing the books with the precision of an accountant and the flair of a seasoned gambler. As lunchtime rolled on, the kitchen crew would take a moment to catch their breath, a brief pause in the culinary marathon. But this wasn't a leisurely break. It was a pit stop, a chance to regroup and prepare for the next round of culinary challenges. The kitchen was a place of camaraderie and competition, where alliances were forged over a shared loaf of bread and rivalries simmered like a pot of stew. It was a world of high stakes and higher pressure, where every meal was a test of skill, endurance, and ingenuity. The myths of sumptuous Tudor feasts may capture the imagination, but the reality was a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes. These cooks were the unsung heroes of their time, feeding not just bodies, but the ambitions and aspirations of a society in flux. Their stories, like the meals they prepared, were rich with flavor and complexity, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the midday sun cast its warm glow over the bustling kitchen, it was clear that the heart of the household wasn't just a place of labor. It was a crucible of creativity, a forge where the ordinary was transformed into the extraordinary. The Tudor kitchen, with all its challenges and triumphs, was a microcosm of the world outside its hearth-lit walls, a reflection of the society it sustained. So, as you stir the pot and keep one eye on the master cook, remember that you're not just preparing a meal. You're playing a part in a grand social performance, where every dish is a status symbol and every bite is a taste of power. The Tudor kitchen might be a place of hard work and humble fare, but it's also a stage where the drama of life plays out in daily bread and common ale. And while the myths of sumptuous feasts may linger, the reality is a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes, feeding not just bodies, but ambitions and aspirations as well. Stay sharp, because the kitchen is no place for the faint-hearted. It's a battlefield of flavors and fortunes, where the stakes are as high as the towering pies that sometimes grace the table. And while the myth of the Tudor feast may capture the imagination, it's the reality of the daily grind that truly tells the tale. As the afternoon shadows lengthen, and the kitchen's frenetic pace continues unabated, let's dive headfirst into the conundrum that is food preservation in the Tudor era, a time when refrigerators were as fantastical as dragons and unicorns. Here, preservation wasn't just a culinary concern. It was a matter of life and death, a delicate dance with spoilage that would make even the most seasoned chef break a sweat. Enter spices, the Tudor kitchen's version of Instagram filters, masking imperfections and adding a dash of flair. But let's be clear, these spices were more than just culinary bling. They were the social media likes and shares of their time, each pinch a declaration of wealth and worldly sophistication. Forget about your avocado toast. In Tudor England, a sprinkle of cinnamon was the ultimate status update. Now, let's talk economics. Spices were the Bitcoin of the Tudor world, with values that fluctuated more wildly than a court jester's jigs. Take pepper, for example. This unassuming berry was so precious it was counted out like gold coins, with a single pound costing a week's wages for a skilled laborer. Imagine paying that much for something you'd sneeze at, literally. The spice trade was a global enterprise, a web of routes that spanned continents and seas, bringing the far reaches of the world into the heart of England. It was a logistical nightmare that would make a modern supply chain manager shudder. Spices traveled thousands of miles, from the spice-laden islands of Indonesia through the bustling markets of Venice, eventually making their way to London's docks. Each step in this long journey added another layer of cost and complexity, turning these aromatic wonders into the ultimate luxury items. But let's not kid ourselves. Spices weren't just about taste. The olfactory overload often served a more pragmatic purpose, masking the less-than-fresh aromas of meats that had seen better days. In an age before refrigeration, spoilage was the arch-nemesis of the Tudor cook. Cooks had to be more cunning than a fox at a chicken coop, using spice blends to camouflage the scent of questionable freshness. It was a culinary cat-and-mouse game where more often than not, the mice had the upper hand. And while we're busy myth-busting, let's tackle the legend of the Tudor palate, often imagined as a cavalcade of exotic flavors and daring combinations. In reality, the heavy-handed use of spices wasn't a reflection of adventurous taste buds, but a necessity born of survival. The idea was less about tantalizing the tongue and more about ensuring you didn't spend the night praying to the porcelain god, or in this case, the wooden chamber pot. This brings us to the economic theater in which these spices played their parts. The Tudor era was a time of burgeoning global trade, where the fortunes of entire nations were tied to these fragrant commodities. The spice trade was a high-stakes game, a geopolitical chess match where each move could alter the balance of power. England's growing appetite for spices fed into its ambitions for empire, fueling exploration and colonization efforts that would reverberate through the centuries. Our obsession with spices was both a reflection of and a catalyst for change in the Tudor world. It was a time when the kitchen was a crucible of innovation, where cooks experimented with new flavors like alchemists seeking the philosopher's stone. Yet, it was also a period of stark contrasts, where the fragrant allure of spices belied the harsh realities of a world grappling with scarcity and uncertainty. So, as you stand over the hearth, adding a pinch of nutmeg here or a dash of saffron there, remember that you're not just seasoning a dish. You're participating in a global narrative of trade, exploration, and wealth. The Tudor kitchen was less about culinary artistry and more about navigating a world of flavors that spoke of far-off lands and untold riches. As the afternoon light fades and the evening meal looms on the horizon, take a moment to savor the complexity of this world. It's a place where the mundane act of cooking becomes a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, where the kitchen is not just a place to prepare food, but a stage upon which the dramas of power, status, and survival play out in a grand, ongoing performance. And as you sprinkle that final touch of spice onto your dish, remember that you're not just crafting a meal, you're weaving a story, one rich with history and flavor, a tapestry of human experience that echoes through time. The Tudor kitchen may be gone, but its legacy lingers on, a reminder of the indomitable spirit that continues to flavor our world today. As the sun dips below the horizon, leaving the Tudor kitchen bathed in the dim glow of flickering hearth flames, the day's culinary symphony winds down to its final notes. Evening in a Tudor kitchen is less about romantic candlelit dinners and more about tackling the aftermath of a day that felt longer than a Shakespearean soliloquy. Here, the cook's journey isn't so much about winding down as it is about setting the stage for tomorrow's encore performance. First up on the evening agenda, cleaning. Now, if you think tidying up your modern kitchen is a chore, try scrubbing soot-blackened pots and pans that have been through a day's worth of open-hearth warfare. The kitchen staff gets to work, wielding brooms and scrub brushes in a synchronized dance that's part necessity, part survival. Remember, this is an era where sanitation is more of a suggestion than a standard practice. Soap, only if you're lucky. Instead, they rely on sand and ashes as their go-to abrasives, scouring away the day's grime with all the subtlety of a medieval battle axe. Let's not forget the floors. These aren't your sleek, easy-to-clean linoleum surfaces. No, we're talking straw-strewn dirt floors where the detritus of the day, crumbs, bones, and the occasional rat dropping, gets swept into oblivion. This is more than just housekeeping. It's a matter of hygiene in a world where the word plague isn't just a historical footnote, but a real lurking menace. But cleaning isn't just about aesthetics or hygiene. It's a deeply practical exercise, driven by the economic realities of the time. Resources are scarce, and waste is tantamount to financial folly. Every scrap saved is a potential ingredient for tomorrow's pottage, and every penny pinched could be the difference between solvency and hardship. This isn't just a kitchen, it's a microeconomy, where every action has a ripple effect on the household's bottom line. Once the last part is scrubbed, and the hearth is banked for the night, the focus shifts to preparation. The Tudor kitchen is a machine that never truly stops, even when the fires die down. Tomorrow's menu looms large, a constant reminder that today's success is only as good as tomorrow's planning. This is where the cook's creativity shines, and where the seeds of modern culinary practices are sown. Consider, for example, the art of pickling and preserving, techniques honed to perfection by necessity. In a time when fresh produce is as seasonal as it gets, preserving food isn't just a skill, but a survival tactic. Pickling, salting, and drying transform yesterday's bounty into tomorrow's staple, ensuring that the pantry remains stocked through the lean months. These methods aren't just culinary curiosities. They're the ancestors of today's artisanal food trends, proving that everything old is new again. Meanwhile, the cook takes stock of the pantry, assessing the inventory with the precision of a quartermaster preparing for battle. Spices, those precious commodities we've waxed poetic about, are counted and recounted, their scarcity a constant reminder of the economic dance that defines Tudor life. Every decision is a calculated risk, a balancing act between indulgence and necessity. This isn't just about feeding the household, it's about maintaining a delicate equilibrium in a world where one bad harvest could send you spiraling into debt. As the final embers fade and the kitchen falls silent, it's tempting to romanticize the life of a Tudor cook, to imagine the kitchen as a place of creative expression and culinary mastery. But let's not get carried away. The reality is far more complex, a tapestry woven from threads of hard work, ingenuity, and a fair amount of grit. These cooks are the unsung heroes of their time, laboring away in the shadows to sustain not just their households, but in a very real sense, the entire societal structure. And what about those enduring myths of Tudor cuisine? While the image of opulent feasts persists, the truth is a much humbler affair. Yes, there were grand banquets with tables groaning under the weight of peacock pies and sugared delights, but those were the exception, not the rule. The daily reality was one of pottage and bread, of stretching ingredients and budgets to their limits. It was a life defined by necessity, where creativity was born out of constraint, and where every meal was a testament to the resilience of those who prepared it. Yet, in many ways, the Tudor kitchen laid the groundwork for modern culinary practices. Techniques refined through years of trial and error form the basis of cooking methods still in use today. The emphasis on local, seasonal ingredients, a necessity for the Tudors, is now a rallying cry for chefs seeking authenticity and sustainability. And while we've traded open hearths for induction cooktops, the spirit of innovation and adaptation remains unchanged, a legacy passed down through generations. As you sit back and reflect on this day in the life of a Tudor cook, take a moment to appreciate the paradoxes of history, how the past continues to shape our present, how myths and realities intertwine to create a narrative as rich and complex as the spice-laden dishes of old. The Tudor kitchen, with all its triumphs and tribulations, is more than just a relic of history. It's a reminder of the enduring human spirit, the drive to create and sustain even in the face of adversity. So here's to you, intrepid journeyer through time and taste, as you raise a glass of ale, naturally, to the hard-working cooks of Tudor England. Remember that their story is, in many ways, our own. It's a story of survival and ingenuity, of the everyday heroism that keeps the world turning. And as you savor the flavors of history, take comfort in the knowledge that, despite the centuries that separate us, we share more in common with our ancestors than we might think. Cheers to the cooks of yore, and to the lessons they've left us, a legacy as rich and rewarding as the meals they so painstakingly prepared. in the bustling heart of early 17th century Japan, where life was as unpredictable as a reality TV plot twist. A young woman named Izumo no Okuni strutted onto the stage and changed entertainment forever. It was 1603, and Okuni wasn't just breaking the fourth wall. She was bulldozing through it with a shimmy and a swagger that would make even the most seasoned TikTok influencer blush. She didn't have a fancy theater or a script penned by Shakespeare. She had a dry riverbed in Kyoto and a flair for the dramatic. The audience, a motley crew of merchants, samurai, and commoners, all eager for a break from the rigid social hierarchy that was as flexible as a lead pipe. Okuni's performance was an intoxicating cocktail of dance, drama, and dare we say, a sprinkle of scandal. She mixed traditional Japanese dance with her own flamboyant style, creating a spectacle that was both shocking and irresistible. Her all-female troupe donned men's clothing, which was about as controversial as serving sushi in a steakhouse. But the audience lapped it up, and soon enough, the word kabuki, from kabuku, meaning to lean or to be outlandish, became synonymous with this groundbreaking form of theater. The timing couldn't have been better. The Edo period was just getting started, and Japan was locking itself down tighter than a smartphone's parental controls. The ruling Tokugawa shogunate had just unified the country, and they had a penchant for order and control that would put a drill sergeant to shame. Social classes were defined with the precision of a bonsai gardener's shears. Samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. Everyone knew their place, and venturing outside those lines was about as advisable as taunting a sumo wrestler. But kabuki was the great equalizer, a social mixer where class lines blurred like a watercolor in the rain. It wasn't just a performance, it was an experience, a raucous blend of art and anarchy. The early days of kabuki saw all-female troupes dominating the stage, and the chaos they unleashed was like a theatrical hurricane. Audiences were riveted, and the authorities were horrified. The performances were a bit too lively, with audience participation that extended beyond applause and became more of a full-contact sport. In 1629, the government banned women from performing kabuki altogether, citing moral concerns. It was an early example of cancel culture, 17th century style. Despite the crackdown, kabuki's popularity soared. The performances were a mirror reflecting the political and cultural tensions of Edo Japan. While the shogunate worked tirelessly to maintain social order, kabuki danced on the edge of chaos, challenging norms and expectations. It was a place where merchants could rub elbows with samurai, where fantasy and reality entwined like lovers in a scandalous affair. The theater became a battleground for cultural expression, where every performance was a subtle rebellion against the rigid societal structure. The rise of kabuki was a testament to the power of art to transcend boundaries and defy conventions. It provided a vivid escape from the monotony of everyday life, offering audiences a taste of freedom in a world where freedom was as rare as a snowstorm in July. The theater thrived on the energy of its performers and the enthusiasm of its audiences, creating a dynamic that was both exhilarating and unpredictable. Each performance was a unique event, with the potential for magic or mayhem, depending on the night. In this charged atmosphere, kabuki evolved, adapting to the changing times and tastes of its audience. As women were barred from the stage, young boys were recruited to take their place, adding a new layer of complexity and controversy to the performances. These anagata, or female role specialists, became central to kabuki's appeal, mastering the art of embodying femininity with a precision that was both revered and scrutinized. This shift marked a new chapter in kabuki's history, one that would see it grow from a cultural upstart to a cornerstone of Japanese theater. The allure of kabuki lay not just in its theatricality, but in its ability to reflect the human condition in all its glory and absurdity. It was a theater of the people, for the people, that spoke to the heart of a nation in flux. Through its bold performances and daring narratives, kabuki captured the imagination of a society caught between tradition and change, providing a stage where anything was possible and everything was permissible. As the Edo period unfolded, kabuki continued to captivate and challenge, a testament to the enduring power of art to inspire and provoke. So, the stage was set for a dramatic shift, not just in the casting, but in the very essence of kabuki. With women officially banned from performing in 1629, kabuki had to reinvent itself faster than a chameleon at a tie-dye party. Enter the anagata, the male actors who took on the challenge of portraying female roles with such finesse that they turned societal norms on their head. These performers weren't just cross-dressing. They were crafting an art form within an art form, a meta-performance that required mastering the subtle nuances of femininity in a way that made audiences forget their gender entirely. The anagata became the poster boys for kabuki, their performances a masterclass in illusion and skill. They perfected everything from the graceful flick of a fan to the demure tilt of the head, embodying a femininity that was both idealized and, ironically, male-defined. This wasn't just a gender-bending spectacle. It was an exploration of identity and expression that resonated deeply with audiences. In a society where everyone had a prescribed role and deviation was discouraged, the anagata offered a tantalizing glimpse of fluidity. Meanwhile, the economic landscape of kabuki was booming like a 17th century stock market on Red Bull. The merchant class, those savvy middlemen of Edo society, were quick to spot a lucrative opportunity. With Japan's urban centers growing as fast as a modern tech hub, merchants had both money to burn and a thirst for entertainment. Kabuki, with its vibrant performances and rebellious spirit, was the perfect investment. They poured cash into productions like it was going out of style, funding elaborate sets, dazzling costumes, and the kind of special effects that would make a Hollywood director swoon. These productions weren't cheap thrills, though. A single kabuki spectacle could cost the equivalent of a modern indie film budget. We're talking about lavish kimonos made from silk that could bankrupt a small village, and elaborate stage contraptions that would put Rube Goldberg to shame. But the returns, oh, they were sweeter than Marchai on a summer's day. Successful shows attracted crowds as vast as the cherry blossoms in full bloom, generating profits that kept the merchant class grinning like Cheshire cats. In this vibrant and profitable ecosystem, kabuki thrived, becoming more than just a form of entertainment. It was a cultural phenomenon, a mirror to the social tensions bubbling beneath the surface of Edo, Japan. While the shogunate was busy crafting a society where everyone stayed in their neat little lane, kabuki was the chaotic highway where rules were more like suggestions. Audiences from different social classes found themselves seated side by side, sharing a laugh, a gasp, or an impromptu debate about the merits of the latest performance. This was the ironic twist of kabuki's tale, a rigid society utterly captivated by an art form that was anything but. The Tokugawa shogunate, with its obsession for order and control, couldn't help but be drawn to the very thing it sought to suppress. Kabuki was a paradox, a rebellious escape that thrived within the very constraints it challenged. It was as if society itself had a rebellious streak, manifesting in the vibrant, anarchic world of the theater. The merchant class, often regarded as the underdogs of Edo's social hierarchy, suddenly found themselves in a position of cultural influence. Through kabuki, they wielded a subtle power, shaping public tastes and driving the entertainment economy. It was a kind of poetic justice. The class that was looked down upon for their focus on profit and trade became the patrons of the most daring and popular art form of the era. All the while, the anagata continued to enchant and provoke, their performances a reminder of the fluidity and complexity of human identity. They became celebrities in their own right, their fame, and allure transcending the traditional boundaries of gender and class. In a world obsessed with categorization, they were walking, talking contradictions, challenging assumptions, and opening minds with every performance. As kabuki continued to evolve, it maintained its place at the heart of Japanese culture, a testament to the enduring power of art to reflect the human experience in all its messy, glorious complexity. Each performance was a new chapter in a never-ending story, a chance for audiences to escape their everyday lives and explore the infinite possibilities of a world where anything could happen. And as the story of kabuki unfolded, it left us with lessons that resonate to this day, about the power of art to challenge authority, the potential for change within rigid systems, and the enduring appeal of a good performance. In the next part of kabuki's tale, we'll dive deeper into the evolution of the art form, the growing complexity of its narratives, and the continued influence of the anagata as icons of theatrical innovation. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the vibrant, rebellious spirit of Edo's most captivating spectacle, a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand a society is through the stories it tells. In the bustling world of Edo, Japan, Kabuki wasn't just content with shaking up social norms and gender roles. It was also busy reinventing the very spaces where these dramas unfolded. Picture a 17th century urban landscape where Kabuki theaters began popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, becoming the social hubs of their day. These weren't just places to catch a show. They were the multiplexes of their era, minus the overpriced popcorn and sticky floors. Instead, they offered a heady mix of spectacle, socializing, and a dash of the scandalous. These architectural marvels were something to behold. Think grand wooden structures with seating arrangements as complex as the plot of a soap opera. Theaters like the Nakamura-za, Ikamura-za, and Morita-za dominated the Edo landscape, each vying for the title of the most elaborate and crowded venue. By the mid-1600, the Nakamura-za was packing in audiences like sardines in a bento box, boasting capacities of over 500 eager theater-goers. That's more than a small village worth of people crammed into one space, all ready to be entertained with the kind of dramatic flair that only Kabuki could deliver. The theaters themselves were a testament to the innovation and creativity of the period. They featured revolving stages and trap doors, the technological wonders of their time, which allowed for seamless scene changes that would make even the slickest Broadway production blush with envy. These innovations were the CGI of the Edo period, transforming the stage into a dynamic, ever-changing canvas. It was an era where wooden gears and human ingenuity worked together to create magic, a time when stager hands were the unsung heroes of the drama, pulling the strings behind the scenes, literally. The stagecraft of Kabuki was nothing short of revolutionary. Take the Maori Burai, or revolving stage, for instance. Introduced in the 18th century, it was a circular platform that allowed entire scenes to be switched out with a simple push, turning a domestic setting into a battlefield in the blink of an eye. And then there were the seri, or trap doors, which allowed actors to appear and disappear like phantoms, adding an element of surprise that kept audiences on the edge of their tatami mats. These innovations didn't just enhance the storytelling, they were integral to it, a precursor to the special effects that dominate our screens today. But the magic of Kabuki wasn't just in the technical wizardry. It was also in the stories and the stars that brought them to life. Kabuki plays were rich tapestries of history, mythology, and everyday life, woven together with a flair for the dramatic. They featured tales of love, betrayal, and revenge, played out by larger-than-life characters that audiences couldn't get enough of. And at the center of it all were the actors, the celebrities of their time, who commanded attention both on and off the stage. One such star was Ikikawa Denjiro Ai, the original bad boy of Kabuki. Born in 1660, Denjiro was the Marlon Brando of Edo, Japan, known for his dynamic performances and intense stage presence. He was a trailblazer, creating the Aragoto style, literally rough style, which emphasized exaggerated movements and dramatic facial expressions. Denjiro's portrayal of samurai and heroes was so compelling that he became a cultural icon, with fans as devoted as any modern-day pop stars following. And then there was Nakamura Kanzaburo, a name synonymous with the Nakamura-za theater. Born in 1598, Kanzaburo was both an actor and a shrewd businessman, pioneering the development of Kabuki's theatrical infrastructure. He was a visionary, transforming the Nakamura-za into a premier venue that set the standard for Kabuki theaters across the country. His legacy continued through his descendants, who carried the torch of innovation and excellence, making the Nakamura name one of the most respected in Kabuki history. These actors weren't just performing, they were crafting identities that transcended the stage. Their influence extended into the cultural and social fabric of the time, with fans mimicking their styles and mannerisms, an early form of celebrity culture that laid the groundwork for the fan phenomena we see today. In fact, some actors even had their own merchandise, with fans collecting prints and memorabilia like 17th century trading cards. It was a testament to the power of Kabuki to captivate and inspire, transcending its role as mere entertainment to become a cornerstone of cultural identity. Yet, amidst all this glamour and innovation, the harsh realities of Edo society were never far from view. The theatres, while spaces of artistic freedom, were also tightly regulated by the shogunate, who kept a watchful eye on content and conduct. The government was wary of kabuki's potential to influence public opinion and stir dissent, and they weren't above imposing strict censorship when things got a little too rebellious for comfort. It was a delicate dance between creativity and control, a game of cat and mouse that saw theatres occasionally shut down or actors punished for stepping out of line. Despite these challenges, kabuki thrived, fueled by the insatiable appetite of a public hungry for stories that resonated with their own experiences. It was an art form that spoke to the universal themes of love, honor, and the human condition, wrapped in the vibrant colors and dynamic movements that define the genre. As the Edo period progressed, kabuki continued to evolve, adapting to the changing tastes and sensibilities of its audience, a testament to its resilience and enduring appeal. In this swirling mix of artistry and ambition, kabuki theaters became more than just venues. They were cultural landmarks, places where the boundaries of class and convention blurred like a smudged ink painting. They were spaces where merchants, samurai, and commoners could come together, united by the shared experience of a kabuki performance. It was a rare opportunity for social interaction that transcended the rigid hierarchies of Edo society, offering a glimpse of a world where the lines between status and identity were not so clearly drawn. As we continue to unravel the story of kabuki, it's clear that this theatrical tradition was more than just an escape from the everyday. It was a reflection of the society that birthed it, a living, breathing testament to the complexities and contradictions of human nature. The theaters, the innovations, the actors, all played a part in crafting a narrative that still resonates with us today, a reminder of the power of art to connect, challenge, and transform. And so, the tale of kabuki marches on, with more twists and turns than a kabuki plot. In the next installment, we'll delve deeper into the narratives and themes that define this vibrant art form, exploring how kabuki continued to captivate and compel audiences throughout the Edo period and beyond. For now, let's leave the curtain drawn on this chapter, savoring the rich tapestry of history and drama that kabuki has woven, a legacy as enduring and dynamic as the performances themselves. As we peel back the layers of kabuki's colorful history, it becomes clear that the enthralling spectacle on stage was only part of the story. Behind the swirling silk and meticulously painted faces, the Tokugawa shogunate played the role of an overzealous stage manager, periodically storming the wings to impose their own brand of order. They viewed kabuki as an unruly child, a source of moral corruption and potential political subversion that needed a firm hand, much like a 17th century version of what parents might think about TikTok today. The shogunate's periodic crackdowns were as predictable as a reality TV elimination round, but with far more dramatic consequences. In their quest to sanitize entertainment, they banned women from the stage in 1629, only to find that the replacement system of young boys, some as young as 7, didn't exactly quell the moral panic. The authorities soon realized they were caught in a cultural whack-a-mole, where every attempt to suppress kabuki only led to more elaborate and creative expressions of theatrical rebellion. It was as if the shogunate had unwittingly handed kabuki a challenge. Find a way to thrive under constraints or fade into obscurity. But thrive it did. Like any good drama, restrictions only added layers to the plot, fueling innovation and pushing the art form into new territories. The limitations imposed by the government became a crucible for creativity. Faced with censorship, kabuki playwrights and actors crafted allegories and coded narratives that flew under the radar of the censors, allowing them to comment on social and political issues while maintaining plausible deniability. It was a game of cat and mouse, with scripts often containing double meanings and allegorical references that audiences devoured with the enthusiasm of a detective unraveling a mystery. Yet, while the audience was captivated by these clever narratives, the actors were juggling more than just lines and roles. Enter the commercial pressures of the kabuki world, a world where the spotlight was both a blessing and a curse. The demand for fresh performances was relentless, and actors often found themselves trapped in grueling schedules that would make a modern-day workaholic break out in a cold sweat. Rehearsals were intense, with actors spending more time perfecting their craft than a college student cramming for finals. And the performances, they could stretch on for hours, sometimes from sunrise to sunset, leaving actors with barely enough time to catch their breath, let alone a decent night's sleep. And let's not forget the contracts, which were less fair trade and more Faustian bargain. Actors signed on to agreements that were as binding as a samurai's oath, often with little room for negotiation. The terms were exploitative, with theater managers holding the upper hand, dictating not just the roles but the very lives of the performers. These contracts bound actors to a single theater for years, sometimes even decades, effectively turning them into theatrical serfs. The promise of fame came with a steep price tag, one that often included personal sacrifice and little financial reward. Even the star performers, the celebrities of their time, went immune to the darker side of fame. While their faces adorned prints and fans, and their performances drew crowds larger than a festival day in Kyoto, their personal lives were often as turbulent as the dramas they enacted. The notoriety that came with being an anagata or a leading actor was a double-edged sword. Sure, it brought adoration and status, but it also meant living under the constant scrutiny of an audience eager for gossip and scandal. It was like living under a magnifying glass, with every misstep and personal flaw magnified for public consumption. And amid these pressures, kabuki actors had to navigate the murky waters of patronage. Wealthy merchants and patrons were the financial lifeblood of the theaters, ensuring productions had the resources to dazzle. But this patronage came with strings attached, often in the form of personal favors or social obligations. It was a delicate dance where maintaining favor with the right people could make or break a career. This relationship was a reminder that beneath the artistic veneer, kabuki was a business, and like any business, it was driven by profit and the whims of those with deep pockets. The myth of kabuki as a purely artistic endeavor crumbles under the weight of these practical realities. The theaters were businesses, and like any successful enterprise, they were subject to the pressures of supply and demand. The need to fill seats and cater to audience tastes meant that artistic integrity often had to jostle for space with commercial interests. The result was a constant balancing act, with theater owners and performers alike striving to maintain the delicate equilibrium between creative expression and financial viability. But here's the kicker. It was this very tension that fueled kabuki's evolution, pushing it to adapt and innovate in ways that kept it fresh and relevant for centuries. The commercial pressures, the governmental crackdowns, and the social constraints were paradoxically the catalysts for kabuki's enduring vitality. They forced the art form to remain nimble, to constantly redefine itself in response to the changing landscape of Edo society. It was a testament to the resilience of human creativity, the ability to find new paths in the face of obstacles. And so, the tale of kabuki continued, a dance between art and commerce, rebellion and conformity. It was a reflection of Edo Japan itself, a society wrangling with its own contradictions and complexities. As we delve further into the story, we'll see how these themes played out in the narratives and characters that defined kabuki's golden era, and how the legacy of this vibrant art form continues to captivate and challenge us today. So, stay tuned for the next act in this theatrical saga, where we'll explore the intricate plots and rich characters that emerged from this dynamic period, along with the enduring influence of kabuki on Japanese culture and beyond. For now, let's take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance of history and art, a testament to the power of storytelling to illuminate the past and inspire the future. Kabuki's journey from rebellious riverbank performances to the cultural darling of Edo Japan is like a rags-to-riches story, but with more silk and less sentimentality. As we leap from the 17th century to the present, it's fascinating to see how kabuki has kept its grip on the cultural zeitgeist, both within Japan and beyond. It's like the theatrical equivalent of a rock band that just won't quit, reinventing itself with every new generation while keeping the rebellious spirit that first captivated audiences centuries ago. In modern Japan, kabuki is revered as a national treasure, its performances a blend of tradition and innovation. It's like a living museum where ancient art comes to life, but without the dust and please do not touch signs. Today, kabuki theaters like the famous Kabukiza in Tokyo still pack in crowds, drawing audiences who are as eager for a glimpse of history as they are for a 3-hour escape from reality. And let's not kid ourselves. The kimonos are still breathtaking, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship, complete with colors so vibrant they could rival a Pantone chart. But kabuki's influence doesn't stop at the theater doors. Its impact has seeped into various facets of contemporary Japanese culture, from the stylized action sequences in anime to the elaborate costumes and larger-than-life characters that define manga. It's no coincidence that anime heroes often strike poses as dramatic as any kabuki actor's mime, the exaggerated stance that screams, "Look at me, I'm the hero." It's a nod to kabuki's flair for the dramatic, a stylistic imprint that echoes through the vibrant world of Japanese pop culture. Then there's the avant-garde theater scene, where kabuki's influence is as subtle as a neon sign. Modern directors borrow liberally from kabuki's playbook, experimenting with its elements to create new forms of theatrical expression. The intersection of tradition and modernity is nothing short of electric, a reminder that art doesn't exist in a vacuum, but is constantly evolving, drawing from its roots to forge new paths. It's like watching a master chef take a classic dish and give it a contemporary twist, keeping the essence but adding a dash of surprise. Internationally, kabuki has made its mark as well, its exotic allure captivating audiences worldwide. It's been featured in films, television, and even video games, where its aesthetic and narrative style add a layer of depth and intrigue. The global fascination with kabuki is part of a broader appreciation for Japanese culture, a testament to the power of art to transcend borders and bring people together. It's a cultural export that rivals sushi, anime, and dare we say, karaoke. Yet, for all its glamour and global reach, kabuki remains a reflection of the society that birthed it. It continues to grapple with the same themes of identity, class, and rebellion that defined it in the Edo period. In a world where celebrity culture reigns supreme, kabuki's exploration of fame and identity feels more relevant than ever. Today's audiences may not be huddled in wooden theaters, but they're just as captivated by the performances, drawn in by the promise of escape and the thrill of the unexpected. The enduring appeal of kabuki lies in its duality. It's both a celebration of tradition and a rebellion against it. It's a reminder that the most captivating stories are those that embrace complexity, acknowledging the messiness of the human condition while striving to transcend it. Kabuki is a dance between past and present, a testament to the resilience of art to adapt and survive in even the most challenging of circumstances. As we wrap up our journey through kabuki's storied past, it's worth taking a moment to appreciate the legacy it has left behind. It's a legacy that speaks to the power of art to challenge authority, to inspire change, and to connect us across time and space. Kabuki shows us that while the world may change, the human desire for storytelling, for connection, and for a little bit of drama remains constant. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand who we are is to look at the stories we tell and the stages upon which we tell them. So here's to kabuki, the theatrical renegade that has defied time and convention to become a cornerstone of cultural identity. As the curtain falls on this chapter of history, it leaves us with a lesson that resonates through the ages. That art is not just a reflection of society, but a force that shapes it, challenges it, and ultimately defines it. In the bustling agora of ancient Athens, amidst the cacophony of merchants hawking olives and philosophers debating existence, there was another constant hum. The stories of the gods, those celestial celebrities whose antics were as enthralling as they were instructive. These weren't just bedtime tales or the ancient equivalent of a soap opera binge. No, these gods were the original headline makers, the influencers of Mount Olympus, whose whims and feuds shaped the very fabric of Greek life. Let's start with Zeus, the big boss of the Olympians, though calling him a manager might be a stretch. He was more like that CEO who spends more time embroiled in scandal than actually running the company. With a resume boasting over 100 love affairs, Zeus wasn't exactly the poster child for workplace professionalism. His escapades ran the gamut from the consensual to the downright dubious, and let's just say HR wouldn't have been thrilled. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of his antics, he was seen as the ultimate patriarch, wielding his thunderbolt like a divine gavel. Zeus wasn't just a weather god. He was the embodiment of power, the guy who decided whether your crops got rain or your fields got scorched. Talk about job security. Then there's Hera, Zeus's wife and queen of the gods, whose marital strife was legendary. Hera was the goddess of marriage and childbirth, which is a bit ironic given her husband's notorious infidelity. But she wasn't one to sit idly by or sob quietly into her ambrosia. Hera's revenge streaks were the stuff of legend. She was the original scorned woman, taking her wrath out on Zeus's lovers and their offspring with a fervor that would make any modern soap opera villain proud. Her vendettas were epic, spanning years and involving all manner of divine retribution. It's said that she delayed the birth of Heracles by sending Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, to sit cross-legged and clasp her hands. That's dedication. But Zeus and Hera were just the tip of the iceberg. The Olympian family was a sprawling mess of sibling rivalries, grudges, and alliances. Take Poseidon, god of the sea, who was constantly at odds with his brother Zeus over who got to rule what. Poseidon was the archetype of the moody sea god, prone to fits of temper that resulted in shipwrecks and earthquakes, ancient Greece's version of a bad day at the office. And let's not forget Hades, the other brother, who drew the short straw and ended up with the underworld. While he might not have had the PR team of his siblings, he ruled with a fairness and consistency that was, ironically, underappreciated. His realm was less a fiery pit and more a bureaucratic afterlife DMV, complete with lineups and paperwork. The Olympian drama didn't stop at the siblings. Their offspring were just as compelling, like Athena, born fully armored from Zeus's forehead. She was the goddess of wisdom and war, a cerebral counterpoint to Ares, the god of war who preferred brute force over brains. Athena was a strategist, the kind of deity who'd play chess while Ares was still figuring out how to flip the board. Then there's Apollo and Artemis, the twin archers, shining examples of divine nepotism, each ruling over entirely different domains, from music and healing to hunting and the moon. And who could forget Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, whose very presence sparked desire and chaos in equal measure. Born from the sea foam, she was the ultimate muse, the kind of deity who could launch 1,000 ships, or at least one very famous war. The Trojan War, after all, was basically a divine beauty contest gone horribly wrong, with Paris of Troy acting as the hapless human judge. Aphrodite promised him the love of the most beautiful mortal woman, Helen, and well, we all know how that turned out. A decade of war, countless deaths, and one very large wooden horse. These deities weren't just capricious characters floating in the ether. Their stories served as allegories and lessons, a divine guidebook to the human experience. The Greeks didn't just worship these gods, they lived with them. Every city had its patron deity, a divine mascot who protected and guided its people. Athens had Athena, Sparta had Ares, and Corinth had Poseidon. Festivals were held in their honor, like the Panathenaic Games for Athena, which predated the Olympic Games and involved everything from athletic competitions to musical contests. These were the original influencer meet and greets, with sacrifices and rituals serving as the ancient equivalent of a shout-out. The influence of these gods extended beyond religion into daily life. They were woven into the very fabric of Greek society, influencing everything from politics to agriculture. Need a good harvest? Better make sure Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was appeased. Heading off to war, sacrifices to Ares or Athena were a must. And if you were a sailor, you'd best not forget a libation for Poseidon, lest you find yourself on the wrong end of a storm. The gods were the ultimate power brokers, their divine bureaucracy shaping the destinies of mortals with a capriciousness that was as terrifying as it was thrilling. Yet, for all their flaws and foibles, these gods offered a reflection of humanity in all its messy glory. They were powerful yet petty, wise yet impulsive, loving yet vengeful. The Greeks saw in them a mirror of their own world, one where life was unpredictable and the line between fortune and disaster was perilously thin. By worshipping these gods, the Greeks weren't just seeking favor or forgiveness. They were engaging in a dialogue with the cosmos, an ongoing negotiation with the forces that ruled their lives. So, while the tales of these gods might seem like ancient gossip, they held a profound significance for the Greeks. They were the original influencers, shaping not just the heavens but the very world below, their stories echoing through the ages with a resonance that still captivates us today. Whether they were raining down blessings or hurling thunderbolts, the Olympians were always in the details, their divine drama playing out in the everyday lives of those who worship them. It's this blend of majesty and mischief that makes the Greek pantheon a timeless epic, one that still holds us spellbound with its tales of power, passion, and the eternal human quest for meaning. And speaking of timeless epics, let's dive headfirst into the swirling chaos of Greek mythological origin stories. If you thought the Olympians were a handful, wait till you meet the Titans. These were the OG gods, the cosmic heavyweights who ruled the universe before Zeus and his entourage took over. Imagine the Titans as the parental figures who just couldn't let go of the reins, and the Olympians as the rebellious teenagers crashing the celestial family reunion. Awkward, right? The Titans were led by Cronus, who had a particular penchant for eating his own children. And no, that's not a metaphor for passive-aggressive parenting. We're talking literal child consumption here, folks. This was a family dynamic that even therapy couldn't fix. Cronus, paranoid about a prophecy that foretold his downfall at the hands of one of his offspring, decided the best course of action was to swallow them whole. You know, just in case. But as with most plans that involve devouring your heirs, things didn't quite go as expected. Enter Zeus, who was smuggled away to safety, and eventually came back to liberate his siblings in a dramatic coup that would make any Game of Thrones plot twist look like child's play. Zeus, with his newfound band of Olympian siblings, decided it was high time to overthrow the Titans. In what can only be described as the ultimate family feud, the Olympians waged a decade-long war known as the Titanomachy. This wasn't just a spat over who got the last piece of ambrosia. This was full-on divine warfare, with the fate of the cosmos hanging in the balance. When the dust finally settled, the Olympians emerged victorious, banishing the Titans to the murky depths of Tartarus, a place so grim it makes your average Monday morning look like a holiday in the Bahamas. The story of the Titans and their overthrow served as more than just mythological drama. It was a reflection of the Greeks' understanding of power dynamics and the cyclical nature of history, the rise and fall of regimes, the clash of old and new. These were themes as relevant to ancient Greek society as they are today. The Greeks saw in these myths an allegory for their own world, where change was constant and power was always up for grabs. And then there's Pandora, the woman whose fateful curiosity unleashed chaos upon the world. The tale of Pandora's box, or more accurately, Pandora's jar, since someone in translation decided boxes were more relatable, is the Greek version of a cautionary tale about curiosity gone awry. Crafted by Hephaestus and endowed by the gods with all manner of gifts, Pandora was the first woman, a divine creation designed to be both a blessing and a curse to humanity. Her infamous jar contained all the evils of the world, and when she opened it, because who wouldn't, out flew disease, despair, and all manner of misfortunes, leaving only hope trapped inside. It's the ultimate I told you so moment that makes you wonder if the ancient Greeks had a thing against opening gifts prematurely. Pandora's story wasn't just about the perils of curiosity. It was a narrative tool to explain the origins of human suffering. The Greeks, practical as ever, saw these myths as a way to make sense of the chaos in their lives. They were cautionary tales wrapped in divine antics, moral lessons served with a side of celestial drama. It's no wonder these stories have endured through the ages, captivating audiences with their blend of tragedy and intrigue. But why did these chaotic narratives stick around, despite their often wild plots? The answer lies in their adaptability and the way they mirrored human nature. The Greeks were master storytellers, weaving tales that resonated with the human experience. These myths weren't static. They evolved, adapting to the changing social and political landscapes of ancient Greece. They offered a sense of continuity in a world where change was the only constant. These stories also served as both entertainment and a moral compass, guiding the Greeks in their daily lives. The gods and their tales were a reflection of human virtues and vices, a divine mirror held up to the mortal world. Whether it was the cautionary tale of Pandora or the epic struggle of the Olympians against the Titans, These myths provided a framework for understanding life's complexities. They were the ancient Greeks' way of grappling with the big questions, offering insights into the human condition that still resonate today. So, the next time you hear someone mention Pandora's box or talk of divine retribution, remember that these aren't just dusty old stories from a bygone era. They're timeless narratives that have shaped cultures, influenced literature, and provided a lens through which to view the world. The Greeks might have been telling tales of gods and monsters, but in doing so, they were telling us about ourselves, our hopes, our fears, and our never-ending quest to make sense of it all. It's this enduring relevance that keeps us coming back to these ancient myths, finding new meaning in stories as old as time itself. And speaking of seeking meaning in the chaos of life, let's dive into the whirlwind of ancient Greek rituals and festivals, the original block parties that combined divine devotion with a healthy dose of human revelry. Forget your modern-day street festivals. These were events that could rival any contemporary music festival in terms of scale and spectacle, minus the neon wristbands and overpriced water bottles. Take the Panathenaic festival, for instance, Athens' grand homage to their patron goddess Athena. This was no small backyard gathering. We're talking a multi-day extravaganza held every 4 years, complete with chariot races, athletic competitions, and a massive procession that wound through the city like a ticker-tape parade. It was the Olympics on steroids, minus the commercial breaks. The highlight was the presentation of a new peplos, a fancy robe, woven for Athena's statue, because even goddesses appreciate a wardrobe update now and then. But these festivals weren't just about impressing the gods with sartorial splendor. They were also about community, unity, and let's be honest, showing off a bit. The logistics of such events were nothing short of Herculean. Just imagine coordinating the equivalent of the entire city's population marching in unison, while simultaneously ensuring that the sacrificial animals were lined up and ready to go. Sacrifices, by the way, were a big-ticket item on the ancient Greek festival shopping list. A single ox could set you back a pretty drachma, but what's a festival without a little bloodletting to keep the divine audience entertained? And then there were the Eleusinian mysteries, those enigmatic rites held in Eleusis, a small town near Athens. These were the Coachella of religious experiences, shrouded in secrecy and drawing initiates from across the Greek world. The mysteries celebrated Demeter and Persephone, mother and daughter reunited after Persephone's annual sojourn in the underworld. The details of what actually went down during these rites are scant, thanks to a vow of silence that would put any modern non-disclosure agreement to shame. But we do know they involved a whole lot of fasting, drinking a barley potion called kykeon, and perhaps some, shall we say, mind-altering activities. It was a spiritual journey and a social spectacle, a chance to rub shoulders with the who's who of ancient Greece while securing a little divine favor for the afterlife. Now, let's not forget Dionysia, the festival dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine, theater, and general debauchery. This was the ancient equivalent of a weekend bender, complete with theatrical performances that ranged from the comedic to the downright tragic. City of Athens went full Broadway, with playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides premiering their latest works in front of packed audiences. Think of it as the ancient Oscars, but with a lot more wine and fewer acceptance speeches. But throwing these parties wasn't all fun and games. It was an economic endeavor that required serious planning. Funding came from wealthy citizens who were expected to foot the bill as a form of civic duty. This was known as liturgy, a system that might make modern tax accountants break into a cold sweat. Wealthy Athenians might sponsor a chorus or pay for the sacrificial animals, earning themselves a bit of social prestige and, hopefully, the gods' goodwill. It was like being a patron of the arts, but with higher stakes, because who wants to be on a god's bad side? Yet, despite the grandeur and the good intentions, not all rituals were as solemn as they might appear. Some were downright pragmatic, if not a tad theatrical. Take, for instance, the practice of scapegoating during the Thargelia festival. In a ritual that sounds like an ancient PR stunt, a couple of individuals, usually social outcasts, were chosen to embody the sins and misfortunes of the community. They were then ceremonially expelled from the city, in the hope that all the bad vibes would go with them. It's a strategy that might not hold up under modern scrutiny, but it certainly gave the Athenians a sense of renewal like rebooting your ancient router. Of course, these rituals and festivals were not just about appeasing the deities or reinforcing social bonds. They were also a reflection of the Greek understanding of time, a cyclical dance of life, death, and rebirth mirrored in their agricultural calendar. The festivals were tied to the seasons, celebrating the rhythms of nature and the endless cycle of sowing and reaping. It was a way to bring order to the chaos, to impose a sense of structure on the unpredictable whims of the gods and the natural world. And speaking of nature, let's not overlook the Eleutheria, a festival held in Plataea to honor Zeus Eleutherios, the god of freedom. This festival commemorated the Greeks' victory over the Persians, and it wasn't just about patriotic pride. It was a nod to the fragile balance of power and the ever-present threat of foreign domination. The Eleutheria was as much a political statement as it was a religious one, a reminder that freedom, much like the gods' favor, was a precious and precarious thing. But let's not kid ourselves. For all their solemnity and spiritual significance, these festivals were also an opportunity to let loose and indulge in the more hedonistic sides of human nature. Wine flowed, music played, and dances spiraled late into the night. It was a chance for the Greeks to step outside the mundane, to transcend the daily grind and touch the divine, if only for a moment. And in a world where the gods were as unpredictable as the weather, who could blame them for wanting to throw a good party? So, when we look back at these ancient gatherings, it's clear they were more than just religious obligations. They were an essential part of the social fabric, a blend of faith, festivity, and a fair bit of theatre. They offered a glimpse into the heart of Greek culture, a culture that knew how to celebrate the gods and each other with equal fervor. And while we may not have the same divine guest list today, the spirit of these gatherings lives on in our own celebrations, a testament to the timeless human desire to connect, to celebrate, and to find meaning in the chaos of existence. As we continue our journey through the rituals and festivals of ancient Greece, let's keep in mind that these events were as much about human nature as they were about divine favor. They were the original block parties, bridging the gap between heaven and earth, showing us that no matter the era, people have always found reasons to gather, to commemorate, and to celebrate life in all its messy, marvelous glory. As we meander through the labyrinth of ancient Greek rituals and festivals, it's time to pivot from the revelry of Dionysian debauchery to the strategic machinations of Greek mythology's entanglement with politics. Because, let's face it, behind every epic tale of gods and monsters is a very human agenda. The Greeks were nothing if not pragmatic, and their myths were as much tools of statecraft as they were tales of celestial drama. So, let's dive into the political theater of ancient Greece, where mythology was wielded like a rhetorical spit, justifying power grabs and territorial ambitions with divine flair. In the cutthroat world of Greek city-states, where alliances were as fragile as a Grecian urn and betrayals as common as an Athenian olive, mythology was the original spin doctor. Take the city of Athens, for instance. Athens didn't just happen to be the seat of democracy. It was a city with a narrative meticulously crafted to position itself as the intellectual and cultural epicenter of the Greek world. And who better to lend a divine seal of approval than Athena herself? As the story goes, Athena and Poseidon had a little contest over who would become the patron deity of the city. Athena, ever the strategist, offered the olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity. Poseidon, in a less subtle move, offered, well, a saltwater spring. The Athenians, proving they had their priorities straight, went with the olive tree. Not only did this myth cement Athena's status as the city's protector, but it also underscored Athens' identity as a beacon of wisdom and diplomacy in a sea of brawny city-states. But while Athens played the long game with its olive branches, Sparta took a more direct approach, channeling the war god Ares to justify its militaristic society. The Spartans weren't interested in olive trees or philosophical debates. They were all about discipline, strength, and keeping their helots, essentially state-owned serfs, in line. Their mythology reflected this ethos. According to legend, the twin sons of Zeus, Castor and Pollux, were patrons of Sparta, symbolizing the city's dual kingship and martial prowess. These stories weren't just bedtime tales. They were the ideological backbone of Spartan society, projecting an image of invincibility and divine favor that kept both allies and enemies wary. And let's not overlook Corinth, that bustling hub of trade and intrigue. Corinth played its mythological cards with Poseidon, god of the sea. This wasn't just about honoring a deity, it was a strategic move, linking Corinth's maritime power to divine will. By claiming Poseidon's favor, Corinthian leaders could justify their dominance of sea trade routes, effectively cornering the market on commerce and naval prowess. It was a masterstroke of mythological marketing, because who would dare challenge a city with the sea guard on its side? But perhaps the most audacious use of myth for political ends was reserved for the big leagues, the establishment of colonies. As Greek city-states expanded their horizons, mythology became a passport to new territories. Colonization wasn't just about claiming land. It was about weaving a narrative that connected new settlements to the divine tapestry of Greek culture. Founding myths were carefully crafted, often involving a hero or demigod as the city's progenitor. This wasn't just a clever backstory. It was an assertion of legitimacy, a way to claim the land as inherently Greek, despite the pesky presence of indigenous populations. Consider the case of Cyrene in North Africa, founded by settlers from the island of Thera. The myth goes that Battus, the city's founder, was led to the site by the god Apollo himself. Now, whether Apollo was moonlighting as a real estate agent is up for debate, but this story served a dual purpose. It tied Cyrene to the divine will of the gods and provided a convenient narrative to justify the displacement of local tribes. It was a classic example of myth as a tool of colonial propaganda, smoothing over the rough edges of expansion with a divine mandate. Yet, for all their lofty tales of divine endorsement, the Greeks were not above a little myth-busting when it suited them. Take the storied concept of the philosopher king, a noble idea propagated by Plato in his works, particularly the Republic. In theory, it was a beautiful vision, a ruler guided by wisdom and reason, ruling not for personal gain, but for the greater good. In practice, however, the concept was about as feasible as a winged Pegasus in the Athenian agora. The realpolitik of ancient Greece was much less idealistic. Power was often seized by those who shouted the loudest or wielded the sharpest spear, rather than those who pondered the nature of justice or the forms of government. The philosopher king was less a reality and more a Platonic ideal, a benchmark against which the messy business of politics could be measured. And while we're on the subject of political myths, let's not forget the infamous Trojan War. What began as a beauty contest among goddesses became a decade-long saga of bloodshed and heroism, immortalized by Homer and spun into a tale of unity and Greek valor. But beneath the poetic veneer was a more pragmatic narrative. The war was as much about control of trade routes and regional dominance as it was about reclaiming Helen. In this light, the Trojan War wasn't just a legendary conflict. It was an ancient exercise in power projection, with gods and heroes serving as convenient storytelling devices to mask the grubby realities of warfare and territorial ambition. In the end, the Greeks were masters at using mythology as a tool of statecraft. They understood that stories were more than entertainment. They were a powerful means of shaping reality, influencing public perception, and justifying actions that might otherwise be deemed questionable. Myths were the ancient equivalent of a political campaign, complete with slogans, narratives, and a strategic appeal to divine authority. They provided a framework through which the Greeks could understand their world and their place in it, offering both inspiration and a convenient cover for the less savory aspects of power. So, as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Greek mythology, let's remember that these stories were as much about shaping human destiny as they were about entertaining the masses. The Greeks wove their myths with an eye toward the future, using them as both a mirror and a map, reflecting their ideals and ambitions while charting a course through the unpredictable seas of history. And as we delve deeper into the connection between myth and politics, we'll find that the Greeks were not just storytellers, but pioneers in the art of narrative persuasion, a legacy that echoes through the corridors of power to this day. And speaking of pioneering narrative persuasion, let's leap from the dusty scrolls of ancient Greece to the neon-lit annals of modern pop culture, where Greek mythology has been given a millennium-long makeover. From Disney's clean-cut version of Hercules to the dark and stormy tales spun by graphic novels, these ancient stories have found new life, and it's not just nostalgia that keeps them in orbit. Take Disney's Hercules, for instance. It's a colorful romp with a catchy soundtrack, but let's not kid ourselves. The sanitized tale is to the original myth what an Apple is to an iPhone. The real Hercules, or Heracles, if you prefer the Greek model, was a hero whose labors involved a lot more blood, sweat, and tears than Disney's family-friendly version lets on. Forget about singing muses and slapstick sidekicks. Hercules' journey was a gritty saga of madness-induced murder, penance, and divine servitude. This hero's path wasn't paved with musical numbers, but with 12 arduous labors, including slaying the Nemean lion and capturing the elusive Cyrenian hind. Disney, of course, decided to skip over the less savory details, like Heracles' bout of rage-induced spouse-side, proving that when it comes to adapting myths for modern audiences, a little creative license can go a long way. But it's not all sunshine and sanitized heroism. Darker reinterpretations have taken root in graphic novels and video games, where myths are stripped down to their raw, primal elements. Take Neil Gaiman's Sandman, where gods mingle with mortals in a world that's equal parts dream and nightmare. Or consider the God of War video game series, where Kratos, a Spartan warrior, takes on the entire Greek pantheon with a vengeance that would make even Ares nervous. These modern retellings embrace the chaos and complexity of the original myths, offering a glimpse into the darker corners of the human psyche and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. But why, you might ask, do these ancient tales still resonate? Why do we keep coming back to stories of gods behaving badly, of heroes struggling against insurmountable odds? The answer lies in the timelessness of their themes. Greek myths tackle the big questions: fate versus free will, the nature of heroism, the consequences of hubris, issues as relevant today as they were in the agora of ancient Athens. These stories provide a framework for exploring human nature, offering a mirror in which we can see our own struggles and aspirations reflected. Moreover, Greek mythology offers a rich tapestry of characters and narratives that can be endlessly reinterpreted. The pantheon of gods and goddesses, with their all-too-human flaws and foibles, serves as a perfect metaphor for our own experiences. Take Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, whose presence could ignite desire and chaos in equal measure. In modern retellings, she becomes a symbol of the dual nature of love, its power to inspire and destroy, to create and consume. It's no wonder that these stories continue to captivate us, offering new insights with each retelling. And let's not overlook the economic factors at play. The entertainment industry is a voracious beast, constantly on the hunt for fresh material. Greek mythology provides an inexhaustible well of stories, ready to be mined for movies, TV shows, and books. Why invent new worlds when Olympus offers a ready-made universe of intrigue and drama? The gods might be ancient, but their stories have proven to be a lucrative business model, generating billions in revenue for filmmakers, authors, and game developers alike. So, while the allure of these myths is undeniable, it's also worth considering the cultural context in which they thrive. In an age of rapid technological advancement and social upheaval, these stories offer a sense of continuity, a connection to a past that is both familiar and foreign. They remind us of the enduring power of storytelling, of the way narratives can shape our understanding of the world and our place in it. As we wrap up our historical journey through the labyrinthine world of Greek mythology, it's clear that these ancient tales are more than just relics of a bygone era. They are living, breathing narratives that continue to inspire, challenge, and entertain us. Whether we encounter them in the pages of a graphic novel, the pixels of a video game, or the frames of a Hollywood blockbuster, these stories remind us of the timeless nature of the human condition, the struggles, triumphs, and tragedies that define our existence. In the end, perhaps the greatest legacy of Greek mythology is its ability to adapt and endure, to remain relevant in a world that is constantly changing. These myths, with their blend of the divine and the human, offer a lens through which we can explore the complexities of our own lives, providing both a source of comfort and a call to action. They challenge us to confront our own fears and desires, to grapple with the eternal questions of fate and freedom, love and loss. And in doing so, they remind us that, like the heroes and gods of old, we too are part of a larger story, a story that continues to unfold with each passing day. So, the next time you find yourself lost in a tale of gods and monsters, Remember that these stories are more than just entertainment. They are a testament to the enduring power of myth, a reminder of the timeless quest for meaning and understanding in a world that is both beautiful and bewildering. And as we close the curtain on our exploration of ancient Greek mythology, let's carry these lessons with us, using them to illuminate the path ahead as we navigate the ever-changing landscape of our own lives. Ancient Egypt, where the past is as layered as a pharaoh's tomb and just as full of surprises. It's a civilization that seems to have it all: pyramids, mummies, and a pantheon of gods with more drama than a soap opera. But let's not kid ourselves. The real scene stealers were the women. Yes, Cleopatra might be the headliner, but everyday Egyptian women were the unsung plot twists in this ancient saga. Spoiler alert, their lives weren't all gold and eyeliner. First off, let's tackle the myth that Egyptian women lived in a feminist utopia. The truth is, it was a bit more complicated than equal rights for all. Sure, compared to their sisters in ancient Greece, who were about as liberated as a marble statue, Egyptian women had it pretty good. They could own property, initiate divorce, and even run businesses. But before you start imagining a feminist paradise, hold your horses. Or chariots, since we're talking about Egypt. Take property rights, for instance. Women could indeed own land and personal property, which sounds progressive, right? But here's the twist. It was often out of necessity. Husbands spent a lot of time away. Think long business trips, but instead of conferences, it was more like building pyramids or getting embroiled in some Nile-related skirmish. Women needed to manage the estate and make sure the family didn't end up as crocodile snacks. They had legal rights, sure, but it was less about empowerment and more about practicality. When your husband might get whisked away by a pharaoh's decree, someone has to keep the papyrus rolling. And then there's the legal system. Egyptian women had the right to represent themselves in court, a detail that would make even modern lawyers nod in respect. But here's where it gets juicy. Divorce was an option too. That's right. They could send their husbands packing with a simple declaration of "I divorce you." Makes it sound almost too easy. But like any good legal thriller, the devil was in the details. Divorces often involved lengthy negotiations over property and children, not to mention the social stigma. It's not like they could just swipe left and move on. One real case, preserved on papyrus, tells of a woman named Tamehodop who divorced her husband and took him to court over land disputes. It reads like a legal drama, complete with testimonies, witness accounts, and settlements. While she did manage to hold onto her property, the social cost was steep. It's a reminder that while the law might have been on their side, society wasn't always as accommodating. Now, let's address the glamorous misconception. Ancient Egyptian women are often depicted as lounging around in linen gowns, sipping wine by the Nile. But let's be real. Most of them were more likely to be found knee-deep in dough, making bread or brewing beer, essentially the staples of the Egyptian diet. Yes, they were industrious, not just lounging like extras in a historical epic. And the hieroglyphs that show women in domestic settings, they're less of a Pinterest board and more a reminder of the day-to-day grind. So why does this myth of a gender-equal wonderland persist? Perhaps it's because the contrast with other ancient societies is so stark. In a world where some civilizations treated women like decorative urns, Egypt was a beacon of relative progressive thought. But make no mistake, this wasn't equality as we know it. It was a complex society where the lines of gender roles blurred, not vanished. In the end, while Egyptian society offered women a level of legal independence unheard of in many other ancient cultures, it was still a world of hierarchies and restrictions. The real story of Egyptian women is one of navigating a labyrinthine system that gave them just enough rope to tie things up nicely, or hang themselves, depending on the day's politics. So the next time you see a depiction of an Egyptian woman reclining gracefully, remember, behind that serene facade was someone juggling legal rights, societal expectations, and maybe even a pyramid scheme or two. Yet, behind that serene facade of Egyptian women reclining gracefully, there was a whirlwind of activity, more like a pinstriped power suit than indolent toga. Let's peel back the linen to reveal the industrious heart of the ancient Egyptian economy, which beat with the contributions of women who were anything but idle. First up, the household manager, a title that might sound domestic, but was more akin to being the CEO of a bustling startup. Ancient Egyptian households were complex microcosms, each with its own set of challenges and opportunities. Women weren't just keeping home fires burning, they were conducting a symphony of economic activity. Managing a household meant overseeing servants, ensuring food supplies, and making sure that the annual inundation of the Nile didn't wash away your economic stability. Inscriptions from the time reveal women like Nebet, who wasn't just a manager but a mover and shaker, handling agricultural outputs that would make modern CEOs sweat. On the artisan front, women weren't just dabbling in arts and crafts, they were skilled professionals. Take weaving, for instance. In a society where clothes were as much about social status as they were about practicality, Egyptian women spun and wove linen into garments that were traded both locally and beyond. This wasn't a cottage industry, it was a full-blown textile machine. Records from Deir el-Medina, the village for workers who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, show women producing textiles that were critical to the local economy. Imagine running a small factory from your home, and you've got the picture. And let's not forget the traders. While the image of an ancient marketplace might conjure scenes of men haggling over spices, women were right in the thick of it, bartering goods and services. Some even took on the role of merchants, a position that required not just business acumen, but a keen sense of market dynamics. Papyrus records mention women like Isisnafret, who dealt in perfumes and cosmetics, a lucrative business in a society that valued beauty rituals almost as much as its pyramids. Her sales pitch, probably something like, "This coal will make even the sun god Ra take notice." Now, did every Egyptian woman enjoy these opportunities? Not quite. Let's not gloss over the social stratification that meant opportunities were often reserved for those with the right connections or the right birth. Yet, for those who did break into these roles, the impact was significant. By the New Kingdom period, around 1550 to 1070 BCE, women even held positions that today would be considered public sector jobs, like priestesses or, in rare cases, physicians. The tomb of Peseshit, who lived around 2400 BCE, identifies her as a lady overseer of the female physicians, which sounds like a hefty title even by today's standards. But let's not romanticize too much. For every success story, there were undoubtedly countless others who toiled away in anonymity, their contributions unrecorded by the male scribes who penned history. And here's a kicker. Even successful women faced societal pressures that could eclipse their achievements with a shadow of doubt and gossip more potent than a pharaoh's curse. The harsh reality was that economic contribution didn't always equate to social elevation. The myth of the idle, pampered Egyptian woman is as persistent as the Nile's floodwaters, but just as misleading. These women were hustlers, in every sense of the word, navigating a society that offered opportunities with one hand and slapped them away with the other. So, why does the myth of the languorous Egyptian woman still hold sway? Maybe it's because the stories of industrious women like Nebet and Isisnafret are less likely to be immortalized in hieroglyphs. After all, lounging around with a bunch of grapes makes for a better Instagram post. If only the ancient Egyptians had invented smartphones. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of Egyptian society, it's crucial to recognize that these women were more than just background figures in a male-dominated narrative. They were active participants in an economy that relied on their skill and savvy. So, the next time you hear about the placid lives of Egyptian women, remember they were more likely calculating margins than contemplating lotus flowers. In the grand scheme of things, these women were the unsung architects of their own destinies, weaving their stories into the fabric of a society that was as complex as the hieroglyphs that recorded it. And as we continue this journey, let's keep our eyes peeled for more tales of grit and gumption, because in ancient Egypt, as in life, the real stories are often hidden in plain sight. As the curtain rises on the power players of ancient Egypt, we find ourselves in the company of women whose stories could outshine any modern political thriller. Let's kick things off with Hatshepsut, a woman whose name practically screams boss lady. Hatshepsut wasn't content to be just another queen consort, oh no. She took the title of pharaoh around 1479 BCE and ruled for over 20 years, a feat that's impressive even by modern CEO standards. But let's not sugarcoat it. Her path to power was less a red carpet and more a tightrope walk over a pit of vipers. She wasn't just breaking the glass ceiling, she was shattering it with a sledgehammer. And like any trailblazer, she faced more than her fair share of detractors. Hatshepsut had to justify her reign through a cunning mix of political savvy and divine marketing, literally. She claimed divine birth, insisting that the god Ammon had visited her mother in a dream. Talk about pulling out the big guns. Hatshepsut was no slouch when it came to economic development either. She launched trade expeditions to Punt, an exotic land shrouded in mystery, but believed to be somewhere along the Red Sea or the Horn of Africa. These expeditions brought back gold, ivory, and myrrh, items that would make any ancient Egyptian's wish list. Her temple at Deir el-Bahri is a testament to her reign, showcasing the wealth and power she accumulated. Yet, despite her accomplishments, after her death, her stepson Thutmose Roman III tried to erase her from history by destroying her statues and omitting her name from official records. Talk about a posthumous PR nightmare. Switching gears to Cleopatra Roman VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom. She's perhaps the only Egyptian queen who doesn't need an introduction, given her enduring pop culture status. Cleopatra was a master of optics long before Instagram filters were a thing. She spoke several languages and was as adept in political machinations as she was in the arts of seduction, or so history would have us believe. Her liaisons with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony were strategic moves to secure her throne and Egypt's independence amidst the power-hungry Roman Republic. Cleopatra's reign was marked by lavish spending. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a stimulus package to win the hearts of her people and allies. After all, she had a country to run and a dynasty to protect. Her coins bore her image, a move that was both narcissistic and necessary, ensuring that her people knew exactly who was in charge. Yet, despite her shrewdness, she was often painted as a femme fatale, a narrative reinforced by Roman historians who needed a scapegoat to justify their own political agendas. The reality, though, was far more complex. Cleopatra was a capable ruler who understood the geopolitical chessboard she was playing on. When the chips were down, she even tried to broker a deal with Octavian, the future Augustus, to secure her children's future. But Octavian wasn't playing ball, and Cleopatra met her end in 30 BCE, reportedly by allowing an asp to bite her. Whether this was true or just another piece of Roman propaganda, it's a death that's as iconic as it is tragic. Both Hatshepsut and Cleopatra navigated the treacherous waters of Egyptian politics with skill and determination, yet they were constantly battling a societal undercurrent that questioned their right to rule. Their stories are often romanticized, but the reality was a relentless game of survival that required them to be both revered and reviled. They defied the gender norms of their time, yet were often reduced to caricatures, a testament to the uneasy relationship between powerful women and history. These queens of Egypt didn't just sit on thrones, they redefined them. They were architects of their own legacies, crafting narratives that balanced divine favor with earthly prowess. And yet, for all their achievements, they were subject to the whims of a patriarchal society that could elevate or erase them with the stroke of a pen or a chisel. The truth is, their stories are as layered as the sands of Egypt itself, a blend of myth and reality that continues to captivate our imaginations. As we dig deeper into their lives, it becomes clear why they remain figures of fascination. They were women who wielded power in a world that was determined to deny them. Cleopatra and Hatshepsut weren't just rulers. They were symbols of resistance, navigating a landscape where every step could be their last in a dance with destiny. So, as we wrap up this chapter in our exploration of Egyptian history, let's keep in mind that these women, for all their flaws and virtues, were pioneers in their own right. They lived in a world where the stakes were impassably high, and where their every move was scrutinized by a society that was both enthralled by and fearful of female power. Their stories remind us that history is never as straightforward as it seems, and that the lines between legend and reality are as fluid as the Nile itself. As we wade deeper into the Nile's murky waters of history, it becomes clear that in ancient Egypt, the role of women in religion was far more intricate than a simple altar and incense affair. Forget the idea of passive priestesses swaying gently to the rhythm of a temple choir. The spiritual stage in Egypt was as bustling and multifaceted as a modern-day megachurch, and women were not just part of the chorus. They were leading roles in their own right. Let's start with the goddesses. In a pantheon that could rival any ancient soap opera, goddesses like Isis and Hathor were the absolute divas. Isis, the quintessential multitasker, was not only a mother figure, but also a healer, protector, and magician. Talk about wearing many hats. She was the original Jill of all trades. Hathor, on the other hand, was the goddess of music, dance, and fertility, proving that even in the ancient world, a good party needed a solid soundtrack and a touch of romance. These deities weren't just celestial beings hovering above in some ethereal sphere. They were woven into the very fabric of everyday life. Temples dedicated to them were not just religious centers, but social hubs with the energy of a bustling marketplace. And what about the priestesses? Well, they were more than just religious decorum. These women wielded influence, conducting rituals and maintaining the daily operations of temples. They were often well-educated, with a deep understanding of sacred texts and rituals, making them the spiritual CEOs of their day. Take, for example, the god's wife of Ammon, a title that might sound like a ceremonial nod, but was actually a position of serious clout. By the New Kingdom period, around 1550 to 1070 BCE, these women managed temple estates and wielded power that could make even the most ambitious vizier raise an eyebrow. Consider the case of Ahmose Nefertari, who was one of the earliest and most famous holders of this title. She was so revered that she was deified after her death, a posthumous promotion that most corporate ladder climbers can only dream of. Her influence was so profound that her image appears in numerous temple reliefs, often depicted making offerings to Ammon. These women weren't just participants in religious ceremonies. They were key players in the spiritual and political arenas, bridging the gap between the divine and the earthly. But let's not get too carried away with the incense and hieroglyphs. The reality is, while these roles offered women a slice of power, they also came with chains. The very titles that granted them respect and authority also bound them to a life of ritual and expectation. They operated within a rigid framework where stepping out of line could mean the spiritual equivalent of a pink slip. The duality was stark, revered yet restricted, powerful yet bound by the duties of their positions. And what about the ordinary women who worshipped these goddesses and looked up to these priestesses? For them, the religious sphere was a place of both solace and scrutiny. The temple was a refuge where they could seek guidance and support, yet it was also a place where societal norms were reinforced. Religious rituals and festivals were public spectacles, blending devotion with a splash of social order. Inscriptions from temple walls reveal how women participated in these events, offering prayers and sacrifices, each action a thread in the complex tapestry of their spiritual lives. Let's not forget the economic undertones to these spiritual duties. Temples were major economic entities, controlling vast tracts of land and employing thousands. Women who worked in these temples found themselves in a unique position, contributing to an economy that was as divine as it was earthly. These roles were a double-edged sword. They provided an opportunity for social mobility, but also came with the weight of religious and societal expectations. And the myths? Oh, they were as seductive as Cleopatra's eyeliner. The idea of a woman seamlessly blending into the spiritual world while maintaining an aura of divine femininity is appealing, but the truth was far more gritty. The spiritual realm was a battleground for influence, prestige, and sometimes survival. Women in these roles had to navigate a labyrinthine system that could just as easily uplift them as cast them aside. So, why did these myths of spiritual utopia persist? Maybe because the alternative was less romantic, a reality filled with political intrigue, societal pressures, and the constant challenge of maintaining divine favor doesn't exactly make for a soothing bedtime story. Yet, it's this very complexity that makes the history of women in ancient Egyptian religion so captivating. In the end, the spiritual roles women occupied in ancient Egypt were as complex as the hieroglyphs that chronicled their stories. These women were not mere footnotes in a male-dominated narrative. They were central figures in a society that revered the divine feminine, even as it imposed limitations on those who embodied it. The relationship between gender and spirituality was a dance of reverence and restriction, a delicate balance that required women to be as strategic as they were devout. As we continue to unravel the layers of ancient Egypt, it's crucial to remember that these women were more than just priestesses in flowing robes. They were pioneers in their own right, navigating a world that was as divine as it was demanding. Their stories remind us that the line between reverence and restriction is as thin as the veil between the mortal and the divine, a veil that they lifted with grace, grit, and a touch of goddess-like grandeur. Thus, as we peer through the veil of ancient Egyptian spirituality, we're left with a layered tableau of divine duties and earthly expectations, a world where women navigated paths as winding as the Nile itself. Now, let's pivot to the legacy of these extraordinary women, unpacking the freedoms they cherished and the shackles they wore, and how their stories echo across the millennia into our modern perceptions of gender roles. First, let's give some credit where it's due. Ancient Egyptian women enjoyed a level of autonomy that would make even some contemporary societies blush with envy. They could own property, engage in trade, and represent themselves legally, a civil liberties trifecta that was practically unheard of in most other ancient cultures. In fact, legal documents from the New Kingdom period, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, reveal that over a third of landowners were women. That's right, these ladies weren't just picking fruit from the family tree, they were planting the orchards and selling the harvest at market price. And let's not forget marriage. While many ancient societies treated women as little more than chattel, Egyptian women could choose their husbands, retain control over their dowries, and even initiate divorce. Imagine the ancient equivalent of a prenup. Only here, it was often enforced by the woman's family, ensuring she didn't end up with nothing but the sand between her toes if things went south. But before we get carried away envisioning a utopia of equality, let's dial it back a bit. Yes, Egyptian women had these rights on papyrus, but exercising them was another matter. The social framework was as rigid as a pharaoh's headdress, often confining women to roles that, while publicly respected, were privately restricted. A woman's worth was frequently tied to her ability to bear children and manage a household. And while some managed to climb the societal ladder, becoming priestesses or traders, the majority lived lives that were as grueling as they were unrecorded. Let's talk economics, because, let's face it, money talks, even in ancient times. The economic fabric of Egypt was tightly woven with the contributions of women, yet they were often paid in grain or beer, not gold. This barter system was practical, but hardly empowering. The economic power women wielded was often confined within the domestic sphere, a reality that limited their independence despite the law books suggesting otherwise. Picture a world where you can own land, but can't escape the societal expectation to marry and bear heirs. It's a paradox as old as the pyramids. And speaking of pyramids, let's address the myth that Egyptian society was a meritocracy where talent and determination could elevate anyone, regardless of gender. The truth is, like a pyramid itself, society was steeply hierarchical. While a few women like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra managed to ascend to the apex, their stories are exceptions that prove the rule of male dominance. For every queen who ruled, thousands of women were grinding away in anonymity, their lives as undocumented as the laborers who built the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But why does this myth of an egalitarian paradise persist? Perhaps it's the allure of the exotic, the appeal of a society where women wielded power in ways that seem progressive even by today's standards. Or maybe it's because the history of women in ancient Egypt is a convenient narrative to contrast against the stark oppression seen elsewhere in the ancient world. Yet, these tales, both real and romanticized, serve as a reminder of the complexities of gender dynamics that have persisted through the ages. Fast forward to today, and we find ourselves still grappling with many of the same issues. The balance of power, the struggle for equality, and the societal expectations placed on women are as relevant now as they were then. The narrative of the powerful ancient Egyptian woman challenges us to rethink our perceptions of gender roles, to question the stories we've been told, and to appreciate the nuanced reality beneath the gilded facade. In the end, the legacy of Egyptian women is as multifaceted as the hieroglyphs that tell their stories. They were not just figures in the background of a male-dominated world. They were active participants in shaping their society. Their stories are a testament to the strength and resilience required to navigate a world where the stakes were impossibly high. where every step could mean triumph or downfall. As we wrap up our journey through the sands of time, let's remember that the true tale of Egyptian women is not one of simple empowerment or oppression, but a complex narrative of survival, strategy, and subtle defiance. They lived in a society that was a paradox of progress and patriarchy, where freedom came with strings attached, and power was a double-edged sword. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond the myths and to appreciate the intricate dance between history and legend, a dance that's as timeless as the Nile itself. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, let your dreams be filled with the echoes of ancient Egypt, a land where women walked a tightrope of tradition and transformation, where their stories were as enduring as the monuments they left behind. And who knows, maybe in your dreams, you'll find yourself sipping a glass of something strong, raising it in a silent toast to those remarkable women who dared to defy the sands of time.